Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Mayor Baker,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember File,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
All right. If you will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
justice
with
for all.
liberty and justice for all. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda is the public comments, and this is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you in the community. We ask that you please state your name and city of residence and limit your comments to 3 minutes. And as a helpful reminder, a timer will be shown on the screen. Will the clerk please show the first, call the first person?
Stacy,
No,
Stacy,
I'm here now, right?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I wanted to,
Please state your name and city of residence.
Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. I wanted to ask again if we can have a vote to agree to the proclamation for Veterans Day and honor our vets, and some kind of little event with the raising of the flag would be awesome if we can get approval on that. Also, I wanted to bring up about the budget, and if cuts could be made in other direction rather than taxes on utility and property tax, because the seniors are the ones that definitely are going to be squeezed the most. And then also with having the pandemic, there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs and haven't been working, so things are tight all over. We appreciate the money that has gone to Hope Link and bringing them into town. That really makes a difference. And some of the fruit and vegetables that have been coming from the farmers, however, meats and other things that are needed, it's really, really hard for the seniors to be able to afford those kind of things. And they're definitely short on that. Also, Simon's Road, if we can get more notice before going to where we lose the one lane at before 92nd, if there can be some kind of warning lower down the hill before that happens, that would be helpful. And then there's one area where the bike lane is wide enough for a semi truck to be in there. And at that point, a van swerved towards the middle line because they couldn't fit in the line. It was a tight squeeze, but I didn't understand why the bike lane is so wide all of a sudden. So I don't know what happened there. But thanks again, and I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you. John Peoples. Mr. Peoples. John Peoples.
Now I'm unmuted. John Peoples, Kenmore. Good evening, City Council. Thanks for the time. Early in the pandemic, local governments were quick to shut down arbitrarily selected private commercial activity while allowing some commercial activity and all government activity to continue. It was lost on decision makers that while they continue to spend the public's money at pre-pandemic levels, The revenue sources to fund this government activity was rapidly evaporating with the lack of taxable commercial activity. It took far too long for them to turn off the government spending spigot. To mitigate the ill effects of this mismanagement, I asked the City Council to make every effort to reduce spending before asking for tax increases. A link on the city's homepage to a list of spending cuts and cost savings would be very helpful. And while I appreciate that the proposed salary plan shows no increase for 2020, I ask that there be no increase for 2021 as well. Next is the pending opportunity to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower and to thank God for the many national blessings we enjoy as Americans. Among these blessings is a federal constitution that explicitly protects our God-given pre-government freedom of speech and expression, including unpopular speech, which is not covered in the very narrow court rulings restricting our freedom of speech. We owe it to every American, from the shores of Massachusetts Bay to the banks of Swamp Creek, to sound the alarm when these freedoms face the risk of suppression. In Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury cautions us that a government all too eager to suppress our freedoms will do so under the pretext of preventing some people from being offended. It was lost on champions of hounding Dory Monson off the air that act was at odds with the spirit and letter of what it means to be an American citizen. In America, we should be able to have public conversations with people who say, disagree with homosexual behavior, disagree with some of the transgender movement's rhetoric, discuss the facts in Monson's post, as well as his thoughts on the matter, and lament the injustice of paid parental leave without fear of retribution. All of these points of view must be allowed to be heard. As government employees, you're required to allow speech you disagree with the same airtime as that you do agree with. Please don't use your positions to squelch speech you disagree with. And if I don't see you before November 11th, happy Veterans Day. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. I see 7 further hands raised. I'm going to call them in this order. David Morton, Patrick O'Brien, Emily Burnham, Sophia Leota, Rachel Regeline, Victoria Grayland, and Rose H. Mr. David Morton.
Good evening, council members. Mr. Mayor, I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. An on-site compliance evaluation of Cadman materials in Kenmore was performed on September 11, 2017 by PSCAA Inspector Hudson. In his report, he noted that he observed 2 asphalt tanks, and plant operator Bauer said the medium cure cutback asphalt tank received regular refills. Then on March 6, 2019, PSCAA Inspector McAfee noted that Cadman is making the warm mix asphalt. Cadman is permitted by PSCAA to produce hot mix asphalt, HMA. Cadman has no permit to produce warm mix asphalt, WMA. Liquid asphalt cement, which is asphalt cement made liquid by heating, should be the binder in the manufacture of HMA. Medium curing cutback asphalt, a liquefied asphalt containing about 35% jet fuel, is often used in making WMA. Chapter 11.1 of EPA document AP42 describes specific methods for manufacturing HMA and estimating air pollution from HMA facilities. However, AP42 does not provide specific information for making WMA, and Chapter 4.5 provides only general methods for calculating air emissions from processes involving cutback asphalt. The primary pollutants of concern from asphalt facilities are volatile organic compounds, VOCs. Of all the types of asphalt binders, the major source of VOCs is cutback asphalt. Only minor amounts of VOCs are emitted from the asphalt cement used to make HMA. Comparing the annual VOC emissions from an HMA plant to the emissions from a WMA plant making the same amount of asphalt product reveals that the WMA plant causes over 300 times more VOC air pollution than the HMA plant. Using the method in Chapter 11.1 for calculating VOC emissions from drum mix HMA plants, an HMA facility using asphalt cement to produce 200,000 tons of HMA per year emits about 3.2 tons of VOCs per year into the air. The methods in Chapter 4.5 can be used to estimate VOC emissions from a plant making 200,000 tons of WMA per year from cutback asphalt containing 35% jet fuel. The result shows about 1,000 tons of VOCs per year are emitted from the WMA plant. Compare that to the 3.2 tons of VOCs from the HMA plant. Cadman, again, has no permit to make a WMA from cutback asphalt. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien, Patrick O'Brien.
Hi there, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. As you know, on Saturday, we had a really big fire out at Lake Point. It was 3 engines. The flames were about 200 feet tall, and there was a lot of smoke. And I was saying, I hope that doesn't hit the asphalt plant, because 2 weeks ago, the asphalt plant in Tacoma burned. The fire chief was scared out of his mind. The pollutants that are in the asphalt fuel, what they fire the plant with, and in the binder itself, is very carcinogenic, and he was afraid that it would go into Tacoma Bay. We have the same situation here. We have had no news about what happened with that 3-engine fire on Saturday, and some of you, as city council people, may be unaware of that, which I find interesting. I think we need to be on top of this, because these folks at the asphalt plant met with Brian Hampson today, and somehow nobody was allowed on the city council, and nobody other than Brian Hampson, as far as I've heard, was allowed to be on this meeting. I would like that meeting, the notes at least, to be released to the public immediately. This plant has no current legal operating permit. They lied, they falsified data on their environmental checklist. I've turned out a red-lined edition of that, what the correct answers are, and I have seen no movement by the city council to pull their permit, pull their illegal permit, until such time as they apply under the 2020 guidelines. We also feel that their dignity and respect is not being shown to the Kenmore citizens. And now I have several hundred complaint letters, which I've started, have been signed. And those people are very interested in seeing the asphalt plant restricted in further operations. And you, as city council people, owe it to the citizens of Kenmore to protect their health above all else. And I'm asking you to do that for your own good, for the city's good, because a wrongful death suit is going to be very, very expensive. Trust me on that. They get expensive. Number 2 is we need to have an immediate hiring freeze and a 1/5 salary reduction because of the budgetary crisis we're in. And yet somehow today I saw probably 5 people out in front on 181st Street doing, anyway, that's another story. You guys have a good night and pull the operating permit on that plant. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Burnham.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank Nigel for forwarding my previous emails regarding keeping the Kenmore canopy. And as I'm looking through the permits, I think you're probably going to go through this in depth more later on. But I noticed that it's $80 for a tree removal, which if you don't remember, I'm the one that wants to keep the trees and maybe make it a little more difficult for people to remove trees on a whim, or allow people to sort of consider before they just clear cut. That goes to both residential people who have trees in their own yard and developers. And then I was wondering, when I talked to you at the council coffee thing the other week, I heard that there was some of the permits and the developers are grandfathered in for up to 10 years ago, which I would love to have revisit that law, because there's so many things that could go wrong in a decade that vast changes. I can attest to that, having moved back after being gone for 10 years. And especially considering the climate, the carbon related reduction plan for Kenmore. And I know that in Queen Anne, even if you are a resident, you want to remove a significant tree, you have to get a permit, which I think is a good idea, just because I think a lot of residents, they don't think about removing a tree or pruning a tree before they remove it. And one tree in each resident's property makes up the canopy that is Kenmore. And it's bad enough to see like the clear cutting of the forests. And if we could do anything, even if it's incremental, to help the goal of carbon neutrality in Kenmore, and maintain the beauty, the natural beauty, so that we're not just all cemented in. Yeah, I would appreciate it. So, and thank you for the letters that I did receive from a few of you in response to my lengthy letter. I appreciate it. And thanks for your work. That's all.
Thank you. Sophia Leota.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia Leota, and I live in Kenmore. I'm here today as the president of Inglemoor High School's Earth Core Club, speaking on the issue of asphalt fumes in Kenmore. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for hearing us and taking steps forward in this process. And I also want to say thank you to council members who had the march a couple weeks ago advocating for voting and clean air. So tonight I want to talk about the asphalt plant, and as you all know, it's near Log Boom Park. It's an area that many residents use, many sports teams, many kids, and the facility could certainly be used for better things. Like, the main issue is that it seems to be harming Kenmore residents. Numerous people have stepped forward with health concerns and breathing concerns, and at this point, it definitely feels like an old issue. It's frankly a little disturbing that there hasn't been action for years and years, even if you look as far back as 1992, when the Department of Ecology assessed the plant. And back then they used a ranking scale of 1 to 5 to estimate the threat of Washington sites to human health and the environment's health, with 1 being the most dangerous and 5 being the least. Now, our plant was ranked a number 1, putting it in the highest risk category. And that's been almost 30 years ago. So it's really interesting that not much has been done since then, especially since it's still a problem today. I mean, since the 1990s, we've had multiple warnings and violations, like in 2011, 2012, 2019. So why are Kenmore residents still breathing these potentially toxic fumes? My asks in this issue is that action needs to be taken right away. And in some ways, this process has already started. So I really want to thank you for that. That's a big step forward. Also, community members and city council members should be actively a part of these conversations. And one more thing that we really need to prioritize is that Kenmore needs to take an active role in advocating for the health and safety of Kenmore residents. Puget Sound Clean Air Agency's words are important, but at the end of the day, it's us, Kenmore residents, that are directly impacted by this issue. And even if the agency doesn't push for extensive testing and further action, that is something that we have a responsibility to do. And a lot of that lies in the city's actions. So I want to highlight that moving forward, as well as thank you for what you've done. We feel there's a huge benefit in open communication, transparency. So we appreciate the steps you've taken in moving in that direction. We are ready to work with you guys moving forward and see further action, making sure that Kenmore residents are safe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Rachel Regeline.
Hello, I'm Rachel Regeline. I'm a resident and homeowner in Kenmore, Washington. I just want to comment my strong support of Rob's financial sustainability plan. I think the city did a really great job of reaching out and talking to community members and putting together a great plan going forward to address the issues that we're facing right now. I want to especially voice my support for the allocations for equity training and radar for our community. I think those are both really critical issues right now. One, because the city council earlier this year made the mayor's pledge. I have not seen concrete actions taken to uphold that pledge, and implementing this plan is a first step for that. Furthermore, these are just basic things that we need to do to make Kenmore a place where all citizens can have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So thank you, Rob, and thank you, City Council, for listening to residents. And yes, please keep pushing for making this a good place for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria Grayland. We see you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm Vicki Grayland and I live in Kenmore. I support the previous citizen comments on the asphalt plant and on the tree canopy. And tonight I'm speaking about the asphalt plant. I want to thank the City Council for supporting the Citizens Coalition that asked for testing emissions at the plant. And I want to thank the city staff for meeting with Cadman today. We look forward to continue working with the council and the staff as we move forward to alleviate the suffering of Kenmore citizens who have been living with these emissions for years. I'd also like to advocate that Puget Sound Clean Air Agency include Kenmore in their upcoming study on air pollution. The mobile homes near City Hall are within the prevailing plume of this asphalt plant, and the majority of the residents are Latinx and may qualify as equity residents for the PSCAA study. As this project moves forward, we will look to the staff and to the council for some timelines and clear information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rose Hendricks. Rose Hendricks.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can.
Hi, my name's Rose Hendricks. I live in Kenmore. I'm here again to talk about the public safety budget, and I'm asking again to get a detailed examination of what Kenmore's public safety needs are and how our contract is addressing them and how maybe it is not the right size for Kenmore's public safety needs. Just as an example, so I'd like to get that on the agenda for the next year's city council priorities. As an example, the $250,000 savings that were mentioned as the pandemic reductions, those are related to sentencing for misdemeanor crimes which are not a threat to public safety. And if we're spending that much in the general fund to lock people up who are by definition not a threat to public safety for misdemeanor offenses, I'm just wondering, can we lobby to keep that kind of savings? That would pay for a lot of the things that we as a city have prioritized. And if it's not addressing a threat to public safety, then what's the money for? So I just really want to get that in there. And I also support the comments my fellow residents have made on the asphalt plant. It's really good to see continued engagement on that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to call the next round of people: Elizabeth Mooney, John Hendrickson, Carl Michaelman, Nadia Silver. Miss Mooney?
Hi, can you see me?
We can.
Okay, what's happening right now is my husband is here and we've got a PowerPoint and he's handling, don't start me yet. Don't start me yet.
Go.
So
if you just share the screen.
All right. Yeah, we're gonna share the screen, please. I'm Elizabeth Mooney. I'm citizen of Kenmore, president of People for an Environmentally Responsible Kenmore. Thank you, City of Kenmore. He's not shut. Can I?
Point of order, Mayor Baker, we are not seeing the screen share.
That's not my job.
Testimony of Elizabeth Mooney.
He's working on it.
It's the.
Shall we pause the time then?
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Ms. Clark? There we go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Elizabeth Mooney. I'm a citizen of Kenmore. I want to say that I do support the other citizens who mentioned the need for clean air and the issues about the asphalt. But I'm coming tonight to speak about how thankful we are, and I'm president of PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, and we are launching with City of Kenmore the Streamfest 2020. So thank you very, very much, City, for partnering with PERC. For almost 10 years, PERC has held a number of Streamfests, autumn events to highlight the environmental awareness, the condition of our local streams, and of course, the return of salmon to their streams of birth. This year, because of COVID-19, Streamfest will be a little bit more challenging with social distancing, Zoomed meetings, masks, and some fun anyway. So City of Kenmore has extended their helping hand to assist us in this mission. We're following up on what we started last year, which was a collaboration that came from the For the Love of Kenmore event in April a while ago. So you'll notice Streamfest 2020 and move on to the next. So first, we're proposing to distribute, with your help, storm drain placards provided by the city to neighborhood groups with some in-person and virtual instruction. The placards remind us that what goes down the drains goes into our streams and into our lake and Puget Sound. We're all connected. In some Puget Sound streams, contaminated road runoff can kill returning coho salmon before they have a chance to spawn. Next slide, please. Here are two of our favorite Kenmore streams. On the left is my beloved Chet Shathal, which the Lockwood kids helped name, an indigenous name that means Little Creek, and we're hoping to get more stories about that from the people who will call us to get involved in this virtual Streamfest. On the right, you see Swamp Creek, which is on the Burt Gilman Trail. We will be hoping to share in providing virtual tours of some of Kenmore's streams, and we hope these photos will encourage other people to get out and see firsthand some of our natural resources. The tours will highlight ways to improve stream habitat and fish access. And we hope that we will put these on both the city website and also on the PERC map, which can be found at lakewashington.us, which was from a Rose Foundation grant. Slide 4, please. In addition, we'll provide some maps to help folks navigate around Kenmore, past the businesses, past our roads and our friends, to help them understand what our landscape used to look like. The wetlands were bigger, the trees were more prevalent. The map on the right is from 1896 and shows land with extensive forests and wetlands. The Sammamish River was a meandering watercourse surrounded by marsh.
Your time has expired.
Okay, so can I hand it to the second?
Was his hand raised? City Clerk?
Well, he can raise it on at the.
Okay, we have other people with their hands raised waiting.
Yeah, well, he'll raise it on the next one.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. John Hendrickson.
You need to kill the screen so we can see the timer, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I'm asking the council tonight to vote against the financial sustainability plan. The process is not at all objective. Instead, we hired a consultant, which really served as a very expensive way to muddy the waters unnecessarily. I think we need to ask the city manager to change the way he does business. We're a small city. He always hires consultants when really we need staff that can figure things out with the council. Example, at Kenmore Village, he hired a consultant. We ended up selling the property for less than half of what we paid for it. And I think we gave them a $12 million tax break. And the process is just run by the consultants. And the council just rubber stamps it, which is what you're being asked to do tonight. The public works site, again, a consultant brought you in. You know, Shrevenick says we have to spend $4 million to buy a ball field and was willing to spend 5 or whatever, how many million on the public works site. And over on 80th, we have a park that was gifted to us. I think it's Twin Springs or something. You could put a public works site on there. You have plenty of parking on there, and you have a level surface where you could probably put 4 ball fields, soccer, baseball, football, back to back. Dave's shaking his head, no, he's wrong. The sustainability plan, also a consultant. When you people, it's very simple what we do in Kenmore. We only do 3 things: police, land use, and roads. So I don't see my time up here when everyone else I could see it. We're a small city. You should be able to figure this stuff out. City manager claims to be a victim. Example, with the road fund, we only have a gas tax. And he doesn't mention that when we incorporated, we had a property tax plus a utility tax to make up for the road tax that we were paying to King County. And over the first 20 years, that adds up to over $100 million. The victims are the public who are being deceived by the city about the road taxes we have paid every year for over 20 years. Leading the task force and the council, the consultants never talked about the need to limit employees. Our feasibility study that we voted on said we could have 13 to 16 employees. I think we're up to around 60. When that subject came up, Steve Toller just pointed to it. The staffing said, oh, we're okay here. No discussion about it. No discussion of the history and the economic realities of being a small city. He also seemed to be leading them, saying, hey, why don't we just cut our expenses on road maintenance? You know, we've been underfunding road maintenance since 2002. By 2012, we were underfunded by $1,395,000 that year. 8 years after that, how much are we underfunded?
Your time has expired.
See you.
Could you please put the time up?
Mr. Michaelman? You're muted.
All right, I think I got this down. Hey, Carl Michaelman, I just want to kind of touch base on a few things.
City of residence, please.
Sorry?
City of residence, please.
Kenmore, 18023 62nd Avenue. Anyway, essentially, I kind of want to, for those who that know me, I have a lot of passion for Kenmore. And I started knocking on doors with the KBA. And the KBA grew so much that if it wasn't for Ann Harkin and myself, there'd probably be no KBA. But I was knocking on doors. And next thing you know it, we've grown. We got to be the Bothell Kenmore Chamber. And I just got a couple things. I wrote a letter, emailed to Council Member Karina, and I CC'd all of you. And I did talk to Karina today, and that part was a good conversation. However, I feel very concerned that none of the council reached out to call me regarding my concern. And quite frankly, it's very hurtful. And what's happening is that now we're looking at the sustainability issue, and you have a B&O tax, even though it's not going to be on there. When we started the KBA, I was championing that go ahead and do business registration. Go ahead and there would be no punishment, that we would not be doing taxes. And I understand this is the sustainability issue, but I personally, and I'm saying this personally, not by the KBA or the chamber, but I personally would like to see this completely out. I feel that by putting it in here, you're going to look at doing a B&O tax down the road, whether it's 26, 27, or 28. And like I said is, you know, for the businesses, I'll be very honest with you. I started getting these businesses going, and I just feel like this is a slap in the face with our business thing. I am going to bring this up to the Kenmore Business Alliance because it does concern me. But like I said, I think I'm more hurt that the letter I sent, not one council member went ahead and reached out. And like I said, with Karina, she did, and my hat's off to her. But it seems like I'm working hard for the city, and then I feel like I got slapped in the face. And my assertion with the entity of what was going on with a lot of people dealing with working for government entities and dealing with the
Thank
tax
you, Mr.
increases.
Michaelin. I'm sorry.
I think there's a conflict there. So that's all I can say for now. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Nadia Silver.
Hi, Council. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Silver. I live in Kenmore. With that name, I have a new title to add to the back of it. I know you guys got one email. Well, instead of an email, I thought I'd announce it for the council to take note. It's something that's pretty exciting to me. I, as of today, got notice that I have achieved my Doctorate of Divinity. So now my name is Nadia Reina Silver Hedgewich Eldris, Doctorate of Divinity. So yay! Really, really hard work, 20 plus years to get that. So there is a reason why I brought that up also, besides the fact that yay. The Dia de los Niños Muertos and Dia de los Muertos is coming up. And I have started, and I let everybody know on Kenmore Neighbors that I am trying to start a community ofrenda. And I invite the council to also participate in that. We're supposed to, the goal is to build it up on the steps of the city hall. And it's so people can honor the dead that have passed from COVID this past year, and just kind of have that community connection once again, so that these people who are sad from this pandemic can feel reconnected to their community and their government, the city government that we do know cares so much. I have a lot to get through, so I'm speaking too fast. I'm sorry. As a child of veterans, as far back as Civil War, as I told you guys in February, I support veterans. If we are not supporting our veterans, we're not doing our job. So I want to put my voice to that as well. I'm adding my voice to the tons and tons of extra pollution being produced by the asphalt plant. I was there last Sunday for that march. I am thanking you guys for doing the equity training thing and the radar. And I want us to have continued concrete moves towards your promise for equity. Like I've always said to you guys, you know, concrete moves, not just lip service. And thank you also for removing policing initiatives from our schools. My heart goes out to our neighbors in Woodinville. There was a recent encounter during a counter protest. My personal friend Heidi Schaubel got, it went bad real fast. And you might end up seeing it on the news pretty soon because it's already on TMZ. So I want to see if we can do, what can we do to support our Woodinville community where that came is concerned. Wow, I ran through these faster than I thought I did. So yes, thank you very much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney.
Thank you. Actually, if I could share screen, then I'll finish up. It won't even take the three minutes. Promise. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see if I. Oh, there's share screen. Sorry, got it. We are getting better at this.
Do we need a name and a city of residence?
Oh, sorry. My name is Jim Myers. I live in Kenmore, even before it was Kenmore. And just to finish up on our Screen Fest, what we hope to do is to get people out there and out looking for salmon and enjoying the outdoors. It's really very inspiring to see these fish. They've traveled thousands of miles, gone out to the ocean, and come back to their stream of birth, and had to put up with seals, eagles, fishers, and other obstacles. Some man-made, some not. But it is quite a sight, and it does give one hope for the future. These are sockeye that are in North Creek, near the North Creek Walk. If you have time, it's really nice. It's very easy access, but we like to get people out to like see salmon and to also ask the question, you know, I wish Kenmore had more salmon. It's kind of a shame that salmon see Kenmore as a sort of drive-through or a swim-through city, and we can't do more, and we can't do more for them. Let's see. So, trying to get to my next slide. There we go. So we're also planning some other activities. We're trying to bring in other groups so it can be as inclusive as possible, doing geocaching, doing scavenger hunts, things that people can do. We can do social distancing. It can be virtually run. We'd also like we'd like to have a website. People can take pictures of their streams and all the fish and the birds and the animals that they see around them, so that we can really appreciate all the wildlife that's out there. And we would really like to thank City of Kenmore for giving us help in this. And we think it's very useful to partner with the city, and we'll keep pushing this forward so everyone can enjoy Kenmore. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Janet Hayes had her hand raised multiple times, so I'd like to ask, oh, there you are. I'm promoting you right now. Ms. Hayes?
Janet Hayes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I am a resident of Kenmore, and I'm speaking tonight for myself and the fact that I'm very unhappy that no citizens were allowed at the meeting today. I had already attended a meeting with Rob, and Cadman and CMEX at the Kenmore City Hall, and I was with Jerry Paulette. He was bringing about his asphalt bill. We were allowed to be there as a citizen and Jerry, who was working on his bill. So I don't understand why we weren't allowed to be there, or someone representing us was allowed to be there today. I would like to see the notes of that meeting, and maybe you all could look up the past meeting and see what was discussed. I wanted to let you know I have a series of health issues from living here. I have a 70-foot deck. It faces Lake Washington and the asphalt and cement plant. I've lived here since 2004. I wake up daily with a headache. I have sinus issues. I taste asphalt in the back of my throat by the end of the day. The asphalt fume smell I feel. I've gone through cancer. I've gone through radiation. The last 2 years have been all medically. And I feel that a lot of the environment in Kenmore is what caused my conditions. That does make me angry, and as I look out at that artwork that is on those silos, it's always since the beginning looked to me like a heron on a scorched earth. I don't like it. I feel that Kenmore hasn't been careful for its own environment. We have a log boom park that, if you look back at old videos of council meetings, Susan Dembowski asked a question about how wonderful it was that we were going to have a swimming beach, log boom. Rob said, "I'm sorry, you'll only be able to put your feet in." Now that tells you something about what we know about the pollution here in Kenmore. Let's find out, but let's find out together. We're going to do it. You should be on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else wishing to be heard? Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? My screen has gone out.
My screen has gone out.
Will
Will
the
the
clerk
clerk
please turn off
the timer?
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I'm trying to get things back here. If you bear with me a second. Next item on the agenda is
consent agenda.
Is there a motion?
Is there a motion to approve?
We're seeing two of you and hearing two of you, Mayor Baker.
Yeah, and I can't
Hard to
really
hear.
do anything about that right now. I'm trying.
Pardon me, Mayor Baker, if I can help advise you, if you turn the volume
Excuse me?
down. If I can help advise you, if you can turn the volume down on one
I have.
device, just one device, it will make all the difference.
I have killed one version of
Thank you.
the Zoom. All right. Just bear with me a second here. This computer is just
Maybe while you're doing that, Mayor Baker, we can have a point of personal privilege for a question to our city manager.
I'm sorry, Ms. File, what are you saying?
I said, while you are getting yourself situated, maybe we can ask a question of our city manager as a point of personal privilege.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, will you please take over this for a couple minutes?
Sure. Go ahead, Councilmember File.
Thank you. City Manager Rob Carlindsey, there was a concern about the water safety and or the health safety of swimming down at Log Boom Park. Would you like to give a little update on that? Because I believe we've had water testing done, and it probably would help clarify some concerns of the community.
Yeah, so we regularly test for fecal coliform and other things there at Log Boom Park. And actually Richard Sawyer, our environmental services manager, is here with us. And so we test the water there at the beach on a pretty regular basis. And I'm trying to remember what the results were. I'm sure Richard would know better than me.
And you said he's available?
Yeah, I see his name here on the panel. Richard, can we put you on the spot?
Certainly. I'm presuming you're talking about this summer. Yes, we have each summer from approximately May through October. We work with King County as part of their beach monitoring program to measure bacterial pollution in different swimming beaches around Lake Washington. So was the question in regards, we did have one high reading this summer. So generally what happens is if you get a reading above a certain level, they'll do follow-up sampling. So we had one result come back high. We followed up with multiple samples, which were all very low shortly after, and it was reopened. But there was an advisory against swimming for a day or two.
So you're talking about fecal coliform, correct, Richard?
Correct, yes. They test for fecal coliform or E. coli.
Okay, and the issue of concern was if the area down there is adequate for swimming and water play, basically, is what the concern came down to, the concern in today's comments.
I don't know what the citizens was specifically concerned with. If it was that, then yes, that was the one issue we had this summer.
Okay, and do we publish our water quality testing reports for safe swimming so our community can stay abreast of that and help keep their families safe and otherwise enjoy our lakefront?
I mean, if when we have this, we will publicly notice the beach and put out signage and social media alerts and things of that nature, yes.
Thank you so much.
but we're not listed with, Richard, can you talk about how we're not listed with, on the King County Swimming Beaches website and why that is?
Yes, the Log Boom Park is not technically an official swimming beach, so we've asked them to do the sampling for us so that we can have the information and notify the public if anything does come up. But the beach is not a lifeguarded official swimming beach, so we do not, King County doesn't list it on their swimming beach program as such.
That's so great. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. And thank you, Rob Carlincy.
Mr. Mayor, are you back?
I will be momentarily. Nigel, you want to go ahead with the first one?
All right. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Moved.
All right. So we had Councilmember Fowle moving. It sounded like that was Councilmember Shrevenick seconding.
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. The consent agenda stands approved unanimously. And that brings us to the business agenda. Ms. Gregory and everybody else.
Thank
And
you.
I'm back.
Oh, great.
All right.
Hi, Mayor Baker. Welcome back. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So good evening to everyone. Yeah, tonight I am back and we are going to continue with staff presentations of various cost centers and funds for your review and deliberation, questions, and direction. Joining me tonight in the presentations is John Vicente, our city engineer, Debbie Bent, our community development director, Jennifer Gordon, our public works operations manager, Richard Sawyer, environmental services manager, and of course, Rob Carlinzi, our city manager. We hope to finish up the operating funds tonight and then proceed into a review and a reminder of the transportation and park capital fund projects that were recently adopted in the CIP. From there, we will review the city's surface water management and capital funds and wrap up with a discussion of the proposed 2021 salary plan. Before we begin tonight's presentation and process, I wanted to ask if there are any questions from any of our prior discussions that we should take care of ahead of time.
Hi, Joanne. This is Councilmember Srebnick.
Okay, I'm waiting for Mayor Baker to call on you, but
I know I don't know if he could see it.
okay.
No. See it. Please go ahead. Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, and my question is, I'm actually not sure whether it's tonight or previous, but I did have a thought about the staff person that we are thinking of hiring for that, the position for the climate action plan, and wanted to raise that. And I believe that's out of the strategic ops. And so I wasn't quite sure where to raise that.
It's partially out of strategic ops, which we actually haven't spoken about. And it's also partially out of the surface water management fund, which we are going to talk about in surface water. So I don't have a preference. We can bring it up at the end of the conversation as we get into surface water management, which will likely be providing the oversight for that program.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, should we jump in?
Please do.
Okay, I'll try to jump into my screen then. I can not ever seem to get my mouse in the right place. Here we go. So I hope you are seeing on your screen the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, indeed.
There we go. Okay. It's October 26th, and we are speaking about the preliminary 2021-2022 biennial budget presentation. And I am going to, just with that brief introduction, turn it over to John Vicente. We're going to go through the engineering fund and then a few other departments that are still left in the general fund, but we'll start with John.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I will first be talking about the engineering budget just as soon as Joanne puts it up.
Did it not come up?
No, unfortunately, I don't have it memorized. There we go. So within engineering group, we are responsible for the transportation CIP, utility permitting, traffic engineering, any development that occurs within the public right-of-way, pavement management, and transportation. Our budget this year, or our budget for the next biennium, is 1.689 million, which is about 6.2% of the general fund. Right now, I have 6 FTEs in my group, including myself. 4, though, are only funded through the engineering fund. 2 of the other are funded through their streets fund. And Jennifer will be talking about that. I've got an 8.6% increase from my 2019-2020 budget. And next slide, please.
Okay, excuse me, before I go on though, I wanted to point out, if you are following along in your budget, and I don't know if you are or not, that the Public Works engineering budget starts on page 106 of the budget document. So I have added those pages to the presentation as we go in case you'd like to refer to them. This is so odd. I have 3 screens all showing the PowerPoint, and the only one that you see is the one that's not advancing. So there we go.
The reason for the increase in the engineering budget this biennium is 2 reasons. The transportation element of the comprehensive plan is due. That is due, I believe, in 2023. So we're going to be advertising for our consultants later 2021 and starting that process in 2022 and completing it in 2023. Also, we are required to prepare an ADA transition plan, and that is due in 2023. And so we need to bring on a consultant to help us prepare that document. It's a fairly lengthy document, and it takes quite a bit of energy to put together. And so we're bringing a consultant on for that. So those 2 elements are why we have the major reason why we have the increase in the engineering budget. The also increase in our budget is our FTE is going from half-time funded through engineering to full-time funded through engineering. Currently, she's partly funded through, I believe, surface water, and partly through the engineering budget, and we're going to put it completely into engineering this next biennium. Within our PBB programs, the highest scoring for engineering was transportation CIP, ADA management, and pavement management. Within the engineering fund, the ADA management is the only thing that's being covered under, it's the only program being covered under the engineering fund itself. The other 2 are, of course, the CIP, and pavement management is partial CIP for overlay and partially in streets fund for pavement preservation. The largest program within our project is the transportation CIP, and that is primarily paid for through with our capital projects through our CIP. And then the utility permitting is our second highest PBB program, and that is funded through our permit fees and is through the streets fund. That's it that I have for now.
Okay, so that concludes the overview of the engineering fund. Are there any questions?
Questions? And we're sharing screen, so I'm not seeing all of you at once. So any questions? I don't see any from Councilmember Marshall or Councilmember O'Kane. Anybody else? Questions? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, John, I saw in here that it looks like you're going to be doing an update on the road standards. Didn't we just do that? Didn't we just do that a couple of years back?
So the first edition of the road standards was written in 2015.
Okay.
And since then, given that it was the first edition, there are a lot of things that we have found with it that need either clarifying or were omitted or just some general errors. And so I'm rewriting it based off of our last 5 years of using the document. So I've just finished the draft and I've got it under review, and I'll be coming to council for an approval because it does affect the municipal code as well too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Looks like nobody else has questions, so let's move on.
Okay, we will do that. We will move next into the Community Development Department, and Debbie Bent will present this department.
Good evening, Council. So community development, we do long-range planning, policy and code development, park planning, and the park capital improvement projects. Our 21-22 budget is a little over 1.6 there, and it's about 6% of the general fund. There are 4.5 FTEs in my department. Myself, we have a full-time parks project manager, an interim parks project manager, principal planner, and a shared administrative assistant. The increase from the last biennial budget is a little over 7%. And the main reason for that increase is on the salaries and also the consultant budget to help with the next update of the comprehensive plan. So to look at a few of the changes, this would be continuing to fund the FTE Parks Interim Project Manager through the next biennial budget. 0.5 FTE Admin Assistant, I currently share that with Development Services Department. So this is not a new position, but this would be a new shared position with the City Manager Department, and that would be the Recreation Coordinator position in the City Manager Department and the Administrative Assistant position in my department. Basically, what accounts for a large share of the budget other than salaries is the consultant budget. The next state mandated update of the comprehensive plan is due in 2024. So all elements of the comprehensive plan need to be updated. So next year we will be focusing on the land use element, which then sort of sets the scene for the rest of the elements. And so the focus would be on single family neighborhoods, and that would include asking the community what they envision in single family neighborhoods in 20 years. So that could encompass part of the public outreach for the Missing Middle Housing Project and also on Lake Point. If there is a planned action plan for Lake Point, that would need an additional $300,000 as an estimate, and that would be funded in the Strategic Opportunity Fund. Looking at the PBB programs, not surprisingly that the Parks Capital Project Management was the highest scoring in quartile 1 and the largest program, as well as the comprehensive plan, which makes sense if you look at what the purpose of our department is. And then affordable housing was the highest in quartile 2, which again matches up with one of council's highest goals. So that's in a nutshell for community development.
Questions? Any questions? Any questions? I am not seeing any hands go up. So looks like we're ready to move on.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Mayor. I am going to move to the next department, which is not a department at all, but it is a cost center. And within this cost center is where we account for interfund transfers from the general fund to other funds. And most recently, those have been typically transferring money to the street fund or transferring money to the Strategic Opportunities Fund. At the current time, the 2021-2022 budget is $1.5 million, which is entirely a transfer to the street fund. It's composed of the water sewer franchise fees of 1.1 million and some additional general fund resources that were identified during the budget balancing exercise in the general fund. So we were able to add a little extra money to the street fund revenue. You'll notice that this is quite a bit less than we budgeted or transferred in 2019-2020. Last year, well, actually this biennium that we're in now, we not only transferred water sewer franchise fees from the general to the street fund, but when we balanced the 19-20 budget early on, we identified $400,000 to put into road maintenance and preservation efforts in the street fund, and reserves of extra $1 million that were to the street fund for slurry sealing and other road activities. We were also able to transfer $624,000 of our reserves to the Strategic Opportunities Fund. But that's the current biennium, 2019-2020. So the budget currently to transfer funds to the street fund is $1.5 million. So do you have any questions about this?
Questions? Again, I'm seeing no hands. So, next one.
Okay, we will move on. If anyone has a question as we move on, please stop me, let me know. And I'll pull up the next slide, which is the Public Works Maintenance Department. And for this presentation, we'll bring in Jennifer Gordon.
Good evening, Council. Can everybody hear me okay?
You betcha.
Awesome. So I'm presenting the Public Works Maintenance Fund, which accounts for all of the maintenance operations for all of our parks and city facilities. The budget is just under 2.7 million and just under 10% of the general fund. The FTEs, we've got 4.5, it's actually 4.55 FTEs in this fund, and that includes our parks, full-time, part-time parks folks, our full-time, part-time facilities folks, and then half of Nikki, our admin specialist time. We've got an increase of about 10% from last biennium's budget. And Joanne, okay, next slide here. And I just wanted to highlight that this does include all the facilities, including City Hall, the hangar building, Senior Center, the Public Works temporary office, and the temporary Public Works yard. And the increase is really due to the increase in potential issues that we might have with our aging facility. City Hall is 10 years old now, and although it still seems brand new and like we moved in yesterday, it is 10 years old now. So we can expect to see some of the things that are break down in the facility, as well as some increase in supplies. And as far as PBB goes, the highest scoring programs are landscape, irrigation, and site maintenance, the hangar facility maintenance and support, and then parks facility maintenance. And these are all in quartile 2. We don't have any quartile 1 programs in the Public Works Maintenance Fund. So this lines up with the highest costing program, which is the landscape, irrigation, and maintenance.
Question, does this include the post office building as well?
Yes and no.
Probably exterior, but not interior.
Well, it does include, some of the budget is in under the JSH kind of hand. So we don't see all of the dollars in this budget. Joanne, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
Well, JSH being the property manager does have a budget for ongoing maintenance and some repair. which they collect in their books. They also collect the rent, so they use some of the rent to offset those expenses. But there are also some expenses in Jennifer's budget. So that's why she says they're not all here. Some of them are managed by JSH, the property manager.
But that contract is also managed by myself, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So the street fund will be next, but before we move out of this department, are there any questions? Because this actually concludes the last cost center within the general fund.
Questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Thanks. What are some of the city hall expenses that might account for the increase? And then maybe just a little idea too of the supplies that you cited for going up in cost. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll start with the supplies. The supplies really is related to this increase in people being at City Hall. So while maybe this first year in the biennium, we will not see those increases because of people not being at City Hall, of course. But we had a higher number of people at City Hall using more and more supplies. So I'm just talking about paper towels, toilet paper, hand soap, all those kinds of supplies at City Hall. And then, of course, with COVID coming in, we're having different protocols and, using a lot more PPE in the day-to-day cleaning of everything. So those are the kind of supplies that I'm talking about. As far as the infrastructure, talking about like general stuff, we're going to be having some upgrades in our access control software program, security camera, hardware and software, in our HVAC upgrades. So they're just those kinds of different upgrades and systems that it's time for, those things to be upgraded and replaced. Like for instance, our access control server is an old server that can't support the new upgrades. So we need to get a new server in order to support the newest software upgrades.
Any other questions? Any other questions? I am not seeing any. All right. Thank you, Ms.
Great.
Gordon.
Yes, well, we're going to keep Jennifer with us because the next fund is the street fund, also an operating fund of the city. But as I mentioned, we've concluded now the different departments in the general fund. But Jennifer is also oversees the street fund, so we will go to that next. There you go.
Okay, so the street fund accounts for the operation, maintenance, and traffic engineering expenditures on street, traffic control devices, sidewalks, and right-of-way maintenance. The budget is just over $3.3 million. And I do want to point out that I did make a mistake in the FTEs. That's not really adding up for me. So I was taking a look at it. It's a little bit confusing since all of the folks that I have are split up between all these different budgets. So overall, we've got 10 people in the operations and maintenance department, if you will, not including myself. And so in this fund, John mentioned in his slides earlier in the engineering slides that there are 2 people that are budgeted in the street fund that he manages, and that's the traffic engineer and the right-of-way inspector. And then the other breakdown as far as the rest of the FTEs is myself, another half of Nikki, who's the admin specialist, and then the rest are made up of our public works crew. And so the public works crew is split up between the park or the public works maintenance fund, the street fund, and then Richard's going to talk about some in the surface water fund. The increase from last biennium budget is only 3.77%. However, this percentage just doesn't really tell the story. Joanne, can you go to the next slide? Joanne's going to talk a little bit about the revenue, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit more about where the increase is, but really there's a lot of decreases at the same time. So Joanne, you want to talk about those revenues first?
Sure. So here you see a list of all of the revenues dedicated to the street fund. The first and foremost is the fuel tax, which is required to be placed in the street fund. It's showing a bit of an increase, which is good. And it's generally calculated on a per capita basis distribution. And the forecasts are developed by the State Transportation Revenue Council, and those are published annually by MRSC for budgeting purposes. So I generally go right to their forecast and calculate what that amount will be. So this year, the fuel tax per capita was 21.24, but it resulted in a pretty big number. And based on our local experience and the fact that revenues are down and travel is down in 2020, and we are projecting that will continue into 2021, Rob and I decided to reduce this by about 14%. Also, even so, it shows over the biennium almost a 6% increase. So we felt that was a conservative estimate. Multimodal revenues are forecast to be $1.34 per capita. Again, we learned that information from MRSC, and they're not dependent upon usage or price. So we felt confident budgeting at the amount that was predicted. Right-of-way permit fees are expected to remain at the 2020 levels in 2021 and increase slightly in 2022. And the transfer from the general fund, you can see, is $1.5 million. That number might ring a bell because we just looked at that in the general fund in the non-department group of accounts that transfers, where we record that transfer from the general fund to the street fund. So that is the other side of that entry. And again, it's a 40% decrease from what we had seen in 2019, 2020 because of the extraordinary one-time transfers that we made. We did not include any revenue in this new biennium from Transportation Benefit District. If we receive revenue and something changes at the state level, that will be great. We decided that we would take advantage of some real estate excise tax, however, because the rules around REIT allow us to utilize up to $100,000 a year for maintenance. So we have budgeted to transfer $200,000 of REIT from that fund into the street fund for maintenance in this new biennium. And that's the maximum allowable. And then the other smaller revenues are just interest income and I think some signage fees. So that concludes the revenue picture for the street fund.
All right.
We'll let Jennifer has one more
slide.
Okay.
slide to speak of with the general fund, and then we can see if there are any questions.
So I mentioned that there was a 3.7% increase in the budget compared to last biennium. There is a very large increase in the electric utility because we're going to be taking over the operation and maintenance of streetlights that have been paid for by North Shore Utility District through their billing. So the community has been paying for streetlights since prior to incorporation, and there was some new law that came out that said that the city was responsible basically for that maintenance and operation. So starting this next year, we'll be taking over all of that cost. And so that's a huge increase to our budget. However, we've decreased some of the different line items to, I guess, even out the damage. So we are going to be eliminating the wayfinding and banners in the next year. So just in 2021, we did budget for 22, but I guess it will just depend on how everything was going. And we'll make the decision at that point in time whether we do banners again. And then we have decreased in roadway materials, and that's just in primarily asphalt and basically less repairs. Moving on to PBB, we've got our highest scoring programs are in roadway and right-of-way maintenance, signal operation and maintenance, and then snow and ice management, and lines up nicely with the amount in the highest cost programs, which are right-of-way and roadway maintenance at 1.9 million, and those are in quartile 1, as well as signal operations and maintenance in quartile 1. Are there any questions?
Questions? Yes, Councilmember Srebnick.
Hey, just a quick question about the NUD piece. So that's, as we've talked about, kind of an unfunded mandate on our side of the business. Do you know if NUD is planning to at all kind of reduce what they ask the homeowners for the residents for in terms of fees?
That should be completely eliminated.
Okay, so they're ideally we think there's going to be some offset of what
there'll be
folks are going
savings
to pay.
to the community for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Can I just add to that? So
Please.
I live in the south end of Kenmore, and I'm one of those neighborhoods that has been paying that utility bill for electric lighting, street lighting. And so on my North Shore Utility District bill, there's actually a line item that says street light, electricity charge, and it's like $1 something. So when we take it over, that line item in the utility bill will go away.
Exactly. And we actually have that same thing for all of our properties that, we have utilities on. We get billed for those lighting, like at all of our parks and facility locations also.
So I remember a few years back, traffic lights. I think some of them were on 522, but I think there were other traffic lights involved that we sold to PSE.
So those are not traffic lights. Those would be just street lights.
Street lamps.
Yes.
Any possibility of doing that?
So the thing is actually, Mayor, we don't own any of our street lights.
Right.
We just pay for the maintenance and operations of those street lights. So there's a small fee for it's a flat rate for the maintenance. And so say somebody runs into a light pole on 522, goes down, that fee that we pay every month goes towards, maintenance costs to replace it. So there's the electricity charge and then there's the maintenance fee. And so we pay those to basically for PSE to just take care of everything for us.
But if a car hits a street lamp and knocks it down, don't we bill the insurance?
We don't bill the insurance because we don't own the poles, but we pass on that information to PSE so then they can get the money for the damaged poles.
Okay, I guess I'm confused.
If it's something that we own, then we would go after that.
Can't we transfer the ownership to PSE like we've done with other ones?
Well, we don't own anything. They do own it all.
Okay.
We just pay basically a fee for the electricity part, and then we pay a fee for the maintenance part. So if, a light bulb goes out or a fixture is, it fizzles out, it doesn't work anymore, whatever, it needs to be replaced. We don't see any of those charges. We don't see those replacement charges. We just pay that maintenance fee that covers all of those things that might come up.
If they own them, why are we paying maintenance? Doesn't the owner responsible for maintenance?
Yes,
How
but
do I get in on that?
I think it wouldn't exist in our city if we didn't need them, I guess.
Okay. Any other questions? No other questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's great. We completed the review of the operating funds, the general fund and the street fund. Now we're going to move into the capital funds. We've already reviewed all of the projects that are in the CIP and adopted the capital improvement program on October 5th. And as a reminder, the first 2 years of the CIP are incorporated into the 2021-2022 biennial budget we are now preparing. So what we're going to follow up with though here is we're going to bring back John Vicente and Debbie Bent and just review what's already been adopted, but they can discuss with you if you need to any of the projects that are actually going to be funded in this next biennium. So the next slide will be the Transportation Capital Fund, and this will be presented by John Vicente.
All righty. So 2021, 2022, the projects listed there are the ones that we've identified as either will be expenditures or potentially could be expenditures in 2021, 2022. The projects, all of the projects are expecting expenditures with the exception of T27X, the Northeast 192nd sidewalk, and T47, the Arrowhead Drive sidewalk. Those are pending any potential grant approval that we might get. If we don't get the grant funds, then those projects will have no expenditures. There's no city dollars allocated to those two projects. For the projects listed above, the funding that we do have, we've got Connecting Washington funds, which support the SR 522 West B project. Those are the only funds associated with that project. The WashDOT Ped Bike program, the Sound and Transit System Access, Department of Ecology, and Department of Commerce, those are funding the Juanita Drive Ped Bike project. Department of Ecology is supporting the 68th Ped Bike project. The Highway Safety Improvement Program supports the 2018 LRSP, the Local Road Safety Plan, signing and lighting projects. And then the rest of the projects are funded through REIT, transportation impact fees, strategic ops, walkways and waterways bond, surface water funds. The strategic ops is, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne, but that's just Juanita, or is that 68th?
I think it's just Juanita, and it's a loan. I mean, it's not, it's kind of an advance of funds, not as formal as a loan to be repaid down the road. But it's just one project, yes.
And then the surface water funds are helping support the 61st sidewalk replacement project. And we've applied for, as I said, we've applied for WashDOT Safe Routes to Schools funding and the WashDOT Ped Bike program funding. The Safe Routes to Schools funding was for the Northeast 192nd sidewalks, and the Ped Bike program was for the 61st sidewalk replacement project.
So are there any questions about any of these projects? I could pull up the budget if you like, and we could go to the project description pages again.
Any questions? Councilmember File.
Necessarily a question, but a comment. I received some nice letters from local area elementary students who very much are excited about having sidewalks to be able to walk safely home into school within our community and near their school. So I really appreciate the work on this, and I hope that our grants do get matched so that we can indeed provide safer routes to schools. So thank you for all the hard work on preparing this budget, let alone the work behind it.
Are there any other questions about the transportation capital projects?
Questions? Any other questions? I don't see anybody. So.
Okay, thank you. Then the next fund that John will discuss is the Sammamish River Bridge Replacement Fund.
So this project, of course, is our bridge replacement, T37. We're replacing the bridge, sidewalks on both sides of 68th. We just recently added the Q jump northbound, north of the bridge. This project also has utility undergrounding, landscaping, some architectural features, signal replacement, pretty much a massive facelift to 68th in this area. This project is funded through Connecting Washington funds, $18 million. The Federal Bridge Fund, which was $12 million. TIB, $7 million. We're getting funding from the Surface Water Fund, which is $1.2 million. There is a contribution from a variety of utilities, North Shore Utility District, Comcast, Frontier, North Shore School District. That's about $1.5 million. And then also, given the time frame that it takes to receive our grant reimbursements, we had to do a $1.5 million interfund loan to cover our expenditures until the grant funds come in. With COVID-19, there's been some, the revenues haven't been coming in as quickly for some of our granting agencies, and so they're not able to reimburse us as quickly as we anticipated. And so we're having to carry the cost until that money does come in, but they have indicated that we will get paid. It just might take a little bit longer than normal.
Any questions or comments about the bridge fund?
Any questions? I am not seeing any.
Okay.
All right.
Well, great. Thank you,
Move
John.
on.
Those are all the transportation projects. That's an enormous amount of construction and project work that's going to go on in the next 2 years. So we haven't even looked at the parks yet. So for the park projects, I'll ask Debbie Bent if she would like to review those with you next, the Park Capital Fund.
So in 2021-2022, there's a little over $8.3 million planned for 8 projects, and which is about 82% of the total 6-year CIP that you adopted a couple of weeks ago. And the Log Boom and Squires Landing walkways and waterways projects account for 94% of the Park Capital Fund spending in the biennium. So those are the 2 biggest projects. If you look at the funding sources for those projects, the largest funding is in bond funds, closely followed by grants. These projects have RCO grants, and we've gone after several other funding sources to try and fill the funding gap, particularly for Squires Landing Park. The rest of the parks projects are smaller in nature. There are 3 projects there which are mostly just the mitigation maintenance for previously completed park capital projects, and that would be the Rhododendron Park waterfront project. But a little bit of that funding is also for installation of public art next year. The Rhodey Park float again is mitigation. The Squires Landing Park float is mitigation, and the Rhodey Boathouse also is for mitigation. So the only other projects left outside of that are the Twin Springs Park project, and that is to do some minimal improvements at the park there so the park can be open to the public, hopefully in 2022. The Squires Landing Park land acquisition project, this was the acquisition of property for the RCO land conversion process, and so the funding set aside there is the Swamp Creek Basin funds, and again that is to do some minimal improvements to open that property to the public, which is also a requirement for RCO. So that's the Park Capital Fund, if you have any questions.
Questions? I am not seeing any questions. One more time through. Nope, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you, Debbie, for the reviewing the Park Capital Fund, and we will move on to the next fund, which I will present. And just because it was a good fit at this point, and that is the Walkways and Waterways Project Fund. So this is really just a resource for the transportation projects and the park projects. This is the fund into which the sale of the GO bonds were deposited. The proceeds went into here, and as the transportation and park projects commence and proceed, we move funds out of the Walkways and Waterways Project Fund, which is the holding fund, into those capital funds. In this fund for the new biennium, we are estimating that we will receive another $10 million if we go out for another issue of the second series of bonds in early 2021. There's also a little bit of interest earnings in there, but we are definitely going to need that second series of bond funds to complete these large projects. So for the biennium of 2021 and 2022, we have $4.9 million budgeted for Walkways and Waterways Park projects and $6.3 million budgeted for the transportation projects. Any questions about this fund?
Questions? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
So you mentioned the second round of bonds. Is this kind of the same? Are we keeping the same schedule with going to the second round, or has something changed as far as that goes?
Well, we had earlier predicted to issue those in 2019.
Okay.
And due to funding and permitting and many other challenges, we did not proceed with trying to issue those bonds in 2019 or even this year because we weren't ready to spend them. But now Juanita is under construction. 68th is about ready, if it hasn't already gone to bid, and those parks will be going to bid, I think, next year. So we will be spending through and needing a lot of funds. So it's time to go for that second $10 million.
Thank you.
If I could jump in here, what won't happen, and Joanne, please confirm or deny this, but what won't happen is a jump in people's property taxes. So the way the bonds are structured is what they call level debt. And so the payment stays the same, and it's meant to keep it the same all throughout the 20 years, regardless of when the debt is issued.
Thank you for that.
Well, there's a little qualification to that, in that had we proceeded with the second $10 million in 2019, it would have been a very smooth transition in the property taxes, going from just paying for the 2016 issue and then adding in the 2019 issue. Since we didn't issue the second series, we couldn't collect tax in 2020 for bonds we didn't owe on. So people experience quite a drop in that rate. Now it is going to go back up, but it's going to be level, very close to level, probably even less than what would have happened if we stayed on the original schedule. It's not going to skyrocket, but there was this temporary drop in the tax rate because we didn't have any debt, additional debt in 2020. Yes.
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Srebnick.
So not a question, but I mean, this does feel like we might want to do some careful public communication about this, possibly. I don't know. Or
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that would definitely be a wise thing to do. The rate, because we've experienced such growth in our assessed valuation since we issued the bonds, the rates really dropped faster than we had projected anyway. So when it comes back up a little bit, assuming nothing really drastic happens in the bond market, anything wild, it'll still be a very low manageable rate, but it will be a little bit higher than this year. And I don't think there's anything wrong with letting folks know about that.
All right, any other questions? I do not see any. All right.
Okay, so thank you. That concludes the portion of the general fund, the street fund, and the capital funds. Now we're going to move into the surface water management fund and the surface water capital fund. These are enterprise funds of the city, and they're so described because they're self-balancing and they have a dedicated revenue stream associated with that. So I will pull up the first slide for the Surface Water Management Fund, and Richard Sawyer will join us here.
Thank you, Joanne. So I will start with summarizing the Surface Water Management Fund. This fund primarily worked with getting the city compliant with the Clean Water Act and the NPDES programs as part of the Clean Water Act. It protects and enhances the city's natural environment. It manages the city's stormwater utility, which is the one utility that we are responsible for operating, and also funds the Surface Water Capital Program. The fund's primary revenue is through a surface water service charge, which is assessed for each real property in the city. Single-family residential properties are charged a flat fee annually, and non-single-family residential properties, including multifamily and commercial, are assessed a service charge based on a rate determined by how much impervious area percentage is on the property, and that's multiplied by the size of the property. So a property with a higher percentage of impervious area pays a higher rate per acre than a property that has less impervious area. In the proposed 21-22 budget, as you can see, we balanced a $7.8 million budget, and this funds 6.15 FTE. And as Jennifer mentioned a little earlier, it's kind of spread out in other departments. So within the Environmental Services Division, which is my direct team, we have two Environmental Service Division technicians. We have, we're proposing in this budget to make a current 0.5 temporary FTE into a permanent 0.5 FTE position that was previously split between Surface Water and Engineering, as John mentioned earlier. And then we fund half of the Public Works Streets Maintenance Division. So 4 maintenance workers and the crew supervisor are each funded 50% from the Surface Water Fund. And this is just based on roughly half the work that they generally do day to day is directly for maintenance of the stormwater utility. I've indicated some of the main changes between the 19-20 budget to the 21-22 budget. The main operating fund has an increase of about 15%. And this does correspond with the rate study that we conducted in late 2018, early 2019, when we kind of looked at the workload coming up and adjusted our rates up to account for that. Primarily just as new facilities are constructed and new NPDES mandates come down the line, we have to continually grow our programs, and we just have more infrastructure to inspect, operate, and maintain. So there's just every year there's more and more stormwater assets out there that we're having to operate and work on. Another one I wanted to point out was surface water, as Joanne said, it operates independently from the general fund. However, operating this utility has direct financial costs to the general fund, and some updates that we've done with our financial software, it allows us to actually go through and itemize just about everything. So everything from, Joanne has to spend time, and her staff have to spend time supporting surface water, figuring out our paychecks and managing HR issues and whatnot. So just across the city, it goes through and it finds all those costs, and it comes up with an amount that is transferred from surface water to the general fund to account and pay its share of all of those services. So some updates as we fine tune that software has, we found that we needed the amount coming from surface water to help cover those costs. And then capital projects, there's a big increase. Again, this was planned. As we raised fees, we knew we had some projects coming up that we needed to start saving some money for. So some of those projects are coming to fruition in the 21-22 budget. So we'll be transferring over that amount from the current budget into the next one, and then using that in those capital projects. And in the highlights there, I've touched on a few of these. And this first bullet will kind of get back to Councilmember Srebnick's question at the beginning. So as I mentioned, there's an existing 0.5 FTE admin support in environmental services. And this extra 0.15 would be an additional amount to help fund the other part of this position, which is going to be, we're proposing to expand into this primarily help the climate action plan coordination. So of that 0.15 would receive funding from the surface water fund, and then the remaining 0.35 is currently being proposed to come from strategic opportunities. Is that correct, Joanne?
Yes.
Yes. So it's not the full funding for that position isn't all coming from strategic opportunities. 0.15 would be coming from surface water as well. And as the next bullet I've already touched on, the large transfer for capital projects, NPDES requirements, and the general fund transfer. Yeah. So there's that for that slide. I think that might wrap up the surface water management fund. Is the next slide the capital fund?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are there any questions on the surface water management fund?
Yeah.
Yes, Councilmember Srebnick.
Thanks. And Joanne had said that this was the right time to bring it up, so I'm hoping that it still is. I know the position is split. My thought over the last couple of weeks, a few times that we've been discussing the budget is, and of course the citizens have raised this too, but I was already thinking this way, is, how can we be, potentially even more cautious about adding staff on a, particularly during this time when folks are stretched due to COVID, and also the economy is a little unclear going forward. We've been doing pretty well in Kenmore because we're not so sales tax dependent, but I'm just feeling very cautious about adding staff because, of course, once you add, you really like those folks, and it's very hard to remove positions. So I guess what I'd like to propose, and see if the rest of the council has any interest in this, is making that position for the climate action plan, which of course I help spearhead the climate action plan, so I'm certainly very in favor of going forward with it. But making that position a temporary 18-month position, and after which we could revisit the need for continued support for that position. But it gives us an opportunity to kind of take a breath at that point and evaluate. And the 18 months, would allow enough time for that person to make sure that the plan is created, and also do some real thorough exploration of how many, if not most, tasks could potentially be absorbed by existing positions. I think other cities have done at least some of that. And we may find that we will still need the position or some of it. So I'm certainly not precluding that, but I guess, before making it just a blanket statement that we need the position on an ongoing basis, I'd like that opportunity for us to reevaluate. Just as in the same way that we did with the halftime rec position. So I guess I'm making a motion that we consider that position to be an 18-month temporary with the option to revisit for continued service.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Curtis.
So over the last several months, I think I brought this up a few times. I was just concerned with the size of the budget and particularly adding new people. So this is sort of a compromise to say, in a year and a half, things might look different. We might decide we really need this position to be permanent. Finances might look better, but just to give us a little more flexibility, I think it would be wise.
Any other comments?
Councilmember O'Kane.
Councilmember
My hand raised.
File and Councilmember O'Kane. Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is a really difficult time we're in. And so when we're talking about expanding our city staff faculties with real cognizant effort of evaluation and noting what surrounding cities are doing, they're splitting this position between diversity and equity initiatives and work with the other half being environmental. And I can see why they're doing that. At any time, our city management has the authority to manage his own staff, whether or not the position is still needed or not, or if it needs to be adapted or not. I trust our city manager to make that decision, and I trust our departments to do that due diligence to advise well. And so therefore, I can't support the position, but I appreciate Councilmember Sharpnett's motion nevertheless.
Any other comments, Councilmember? Yes, O'Kane, and then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, although I recognize the sense of need for caution proceeding with adding positions to our budget, I will state a couple of things here. I'm going to take my time because I think it's incredibly important that we invest in climate. It's certainly optimistic to think that 18 months is realistic for an investment in a position such as this. I would actually state that we probably need to invest more deeply and more thoroughly. In times of crisis, this is when city government needs to invest in itself so that we can build and sustain our community, especially when people outside our government might not have the means to do so. In addition, we are in the midst of an existential climate crisis. We have made the Climate Action Plan our #3 priority, and I would advocate that it move to #1. And I will strongly do that at our retreat this year. We have our community coming out in force, standing for our environment, and it certainly makes absolutely no sense to me to set it as a temporary position. So I do not support this move, and I will state it strongly. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I actually just wanted to ask staff if they had any thoughts on the proposal.
City Manager, I know you wanted to weigh in here.
Yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Richard Sawyer. This is, we are going into new territory here, so to speak, and so I can understand why, Councilmember Shrevenick wants us to be cautious. because I think part of our reasoning is, there's going to be a lot of work getting the plan developed and implemented. But then a lot of it would just be then spread throughout the organization. Like we would change our purchasing policies and the way we deal with fleet and equipment and things like that. And while that is true, my crystal ball and given the limited experience I have with climate action, my crystal ball says that we will have ongoing work. Because remember, climate action plan is not just internal to the organization, but it's also the whole community. And so there's going to be continued need for community outreach and engagement and messaging and all those things that you got to do with the community. And rather than just absorb that into the organization like we have done such a good job at it, so many countless other programs, I do see the need for some ongoing work. Could we at least make it a 2-year position to fill out the biennium? That's a possibility. But I'd like to turn it over to Richard because he has some thoughts on some of the ongoing work as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So as you're aware, we've been working on kind of the plan for the plan, utilizing a half-time graduate intern this year. And, we're just kind of wrapping up phase 1 of that initial effort, which has just been kind of figuring out, inventorying our greenhouse gas emissions that we know of now and historically. And then next year, we've got a lot of work to start actually developing the plan, and which, as we've kind of done in some previous presentations, phase 2 and 3 is going to, establishing what our targets are going to be, developing a plan on how we're going to achieve those targets, and then into 2022, we'll be getting into implementation, and then there's a lot of work involved with monitoring and tracking what you're doing. It's an always changing and evolving process. So there's going to be a lot of work for, I think, even a half-time person to really be able to help accomplish these goals. A lot of the there's going to be a lot of internal coordination and communication and data collection across departments. I think as we found just with this initial effort of inventorying our greenhouse gases has taken a lot of time and effort figuring out what we have, how we do things, what our processes are. And then when we want to start developing a plan to modify those and improve those, it's going to take a lot of time just to have someone available internally to review and coordinate between departments on what the impacts would be and figuring out, from all the different stakeholders internally what they need, and it's just a lot of work and reviewing material and working with folks in here. And that's just the internal, as Rob alluded to, there's a whole external component to this as well. We have to figure out what's going on community-wide, and this person will have spending a lot of time coordinating and managing that external communication and working with a lot of our stakeholders regionally. There's a lot of great work going on with other jurisdictions. We work closely with King County. We just joined ICLEI, a national organization, this year. So we're working with them. K4C, we joined a couple years ago, and they're doing a lot of great work. And there's just a lot of time involved with meeting with all these stakeholders and working together to figure out, what we can do and move forward and implement those. We've got a consultant on board through this greenhouse gas inventory process that we plan to continue working with through the next year or two. And so coordinating with them, and as well as all of our local utilities, we found, we are working with them, NUD, PSC, Waste Management, trying to, they're very heavily involved with how the city's operations are impacted with greenhouse gas emissions and how we can effectively improve our climate footprint here. So there's a lot of material to review and meetings, presentations. So I think there's a large time component that is going to really be needed to effectively do this the right way. So, you know, when we looked at what our capacity is internally, it's, you know, we, like I said, I mean, a halftime is, I think, kind of us trying to be cautious in what we're asking for. But, you know, it's going to barely be enough. And actually this week, K4C is holding our a 2-day retreat, and we're discussing kind of all the climate action work going on. And there are a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions, as someone mentioned, you know, I see a lot of new names, and there's climate action managers being hired, there's new sustainability managers being hired, planners. So I would say that folks are finding the need to staff their cities in order to take on this effort. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling now, but I think, I mean, I really feel that, like I said, you know, having this with a 0.5 FTE would be the minimum that we really need. As was mentioned, this was, you know, number 3 council priority. So we're trying to figure out a way to provide the resources in order to meet that priority that council's identified.
All right, any other questions? There is a motion in front of us.
One more thing to add, Mayor Baker.
I'm sorry?
I had one more thing to add, Mayor Baker.
Please, Councilmember File.
Thank you. I just want to support Mr. Richard Sawyer and what he was trying to share. Furthermore, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to facilitate working with public and nonprofit partners and getting the work projects out, done, and launched. Considerable time to lean in on that. And so I support what he's trying to share, that it's a lot of time spent doing that, let alone working with the organization, let alone working with our stakeholders. Considerable time. I don't think that people really understand how much time it takes to facilitate that work, but he's trying to share that well.
All right.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, Councilmember Marshall, please.
Thank you. It's, to me, a very tough decision for two obviously very important goals of our environmental action plan and a balanced budget. I feel that this is where tough decisions have to be made. I think that Councilmember Srebnick's proposal is a reasonable one in terms of striking a compromise to try and honor both those values. It's a very difficult decision, but I support Councilmember Srebnick's motion.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend Councilmember Srebnick's motion to 24 months instead of 18.
You want the position to be temporary for 24 months instead of 18, is that correct?
Yeah, for the biennium.
Fine. So there is an amendment on the table to extend the temporary nature of the position from 18 months to 24 months.
I'm good with that. I'll second that. I don't know if you need the originator to second it. but-
No, we need anybody to second it, so we got a second. Now, any comments on the amendment?
Councilmember O'Kane has a comment.
Yes, Councilmember O'Kane.
Do we really think that there's a possibility? I personally, I think 2 years, at least we'll have this funded for 2 years. But this is a position that I think I can say right now, we know we're going to need in 2 years. Do we really want to be sugarcoating this? To me, I think that our city management has put a great deal of thought and care and consideration into this position. I think they would actually like to be asking for more if they could. I can go with 2 years, but I personally think that it's overly optimistic, and we do need to be investing in our climate heartily. And
right.
that's just my statement. And thank you for interrupting, Mayor.
I didn't mean to. I thought you were finished. All right. There is an amendment on the table to go from 18 months to 24 months. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay anything that Councilmember, well, any of my colleagues have said, frankly. I agree with a lot of what everybody has said so far. This position is important. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of that or the work that's going to be done on climate at all. But I think what Councilmember Srebnick was trying to do is, as Councilmember Marshall said, kind of balance between kind of the stark budget realities we're facing, and adding new FTEs is one of the hardest things to undo, as Councilmember Srebnick said, because there's a real human who, at the end of the day, is losing their job if you get rid of the FTE, and that makes it harder. I fully think that we will likely extend this position in 2 years, but I think it'd be wise to leave a little bit of wiggle room in there in case the future doesn't line up the way we want it to. Things have been so topsy-turvy lately that I think leaving a little bit of flexibility is wise for us as we're going forward. And this gives the position the biennium. This gives the council the biennium to see what happens with that. I think this is a smart compromise.
Any further comments? Questions? The motion before us is to change 18 months to 24 months. Seeing nobody else wanting to speak, will the clerk please take the roll on the amendment?
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Clarity, is this just for passing the amendment, or are we voting on it? Okay. I'll vote yes for passing the amendment.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
The amendment passes.
All right, so the motion now before us as amended is to hire a temporary person for 24 months.
Mayor Baker,
File.
or Councilmember O'Kane.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Apologies. I just want to state my position clearly on this. I think now is a time for courage for us to stand for the environment. I think it's absolutely important for us to be a city that invests in the climate and is honest about the need with our community. I just need to state that. I'm glad we're moving to 2 years, but I don't think that I want to be in a city in 2 years that has a half-time FTE, and that is it, dedicated to climate in 2 years. I certainly hope that we as a city expand our investment greatly. We have an opportunity to create, when we invest in climate, we have an opportunity to drive clean jobs, green jobs to the area. A superficial investment is not sufficient at this time. But I'm glad we are moving in this direction. But you're going to hear a strong advocate for the environment from me, always. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Comments? Motion in front of us is to hire the position in question on a temporary basis for 24 months.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yeah, I'm scrolling up. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, just to reiterate, as you know, I'm actually the person who, wrote the outline for the plan that we discussed and elevated and prioritized at the retreat. So, clearly I'm invested in this issue. I spent a lot of hours working on that and talking to folks, looking at other city plans, seeing what they're trying to do. So I have a fairly clear idea of the direction that other cities of our size and larger are trying to do. So, and I clearly want that investment, and I'm thrilled that we prioritized it. I also feel strongly that one of our responsibilities is fiscal prudence. this job that we do as city council people is a balancing act. And, you know, just like the balancing act that we gave to our citizens in that exercise. So that's simply the reason that I wanted to give us as a council an opportunity to reflect on this particular piece. Not asking to question the other staffing increases, although, you know, any time we increase the budget, I think we as a council have to think, we must think very carefully and make sure that we have a clear rationale. And I think, you know, Rob does a great job of being clear about why we need certain things. And you know, is commendable, but I just want us to have that time to take a breath and reflect. So that's purely why I'm proposing this.
All right. Any
I
other
have
questions?
one more comment. I'm sorry. May I, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember O'Kane.
I will say this. It is absolutely fiscally prudent to invest in the climate and in the environment. It is irresponsible to give any allusion to the fact that that is not responsible. It is fiscally prudent given what science says is going to be happening to our environment and the economic impacts of not clearly investing in it. And I appreciate that Councilmember Srebnick brought the Climate Action Plan to the table, to the retreat. I know she had my strong support behind that, and we as a council elevated it. But any illusion that this sort of a position is not prudent, not something that I agree with. Thank you.
All right. Any other person wishing to be heard on this? Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, we are facing a level of job loss not seen in our lifetimes, not seen since World War II, or even, I think I saw the headlines in the Times the other day, it was number of jobs lost equaled the Great Depression and the Great Recession combined. So I do feel it's important that we make tough choices. And I think that Councilmember Srebnick's proposal is reasonable in that light. We have got to have a budget that at least makes some semblance of being financially sustainable. And I think it's a constructive act to consider this. We definitely want to include and honor the environment and prioritizing its protection going forward.
All right. If there's nothing further, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I just want to state that as the council member that started going to K4C meetings and got the city to join K4C, you know, I'm not going to secede that this motion in any way takes away from the importance of the work that's being done by the position. I take the climate very seriously. I fully believe that this position will probably last longer than 24 months. I still think it's important for the council to have a chance to, and frankly for staff to have a chance to look at what happens in 24 months and evaluate, is this the right position? Is half-time enough? Are there things that can be taken up by departments? It's important to have that time to reevaluate. Maybe we decide that we need more on this. I don't know. But I think, especially with the budget that we're facing here, I think it is important to just be able to take that breath in a couple of years, like Councilmember Srebnick said. I fully expect that we'll move forward with this position longer than that, but I just think it's important to be able to have that time to reevaluate in 2 years. That's all.
All right. If there's nothing new to be added to this, will the clerk please take the roll and state the motion in front of us?
The motion in front of us is to hire the stated environmental services position with a focus on climate action for the duration of 24 months instead of the 18 months.
Great. Will you please take the roll?
Councilmember O'Kane.
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
I'd like to clarify my vote first. I'm taking this position, recognizing our financial fiscal responsibility as council members to support our city, but I stand with supporting our environment. But I only am taking the no vote for standing behind our fiscal responsibility, knowing that this really should be a long-term position.
So you're voting no?
Yeah, correct.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Five
Motion,
yeses, motion passes.
excuse me?
5 yeses, motion passes.
5. Could you, I didn't get 5.
Councilmember O'Kane and Councilmember File voted no.
Okay. Oh, okay, fine. I'm with you. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is financial stability plan and related resolution number 20357, presented by the city manager, Mr. Carlinzy, and finance and administration director, Ms. Joanne Gregory, and Steve Toller from Management Partners.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Joanne, could you unshare? And do any of you need to take a little break at all?
Yeah, could we have 5?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Rob?
Did Rob leave? I don't believe we were done with surface water.
We are not done. We are not done. I don't know what happened.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, 6. We need to get back at it. And we weren't quite finished with environmental services, Mr. Sawyer.
Can I make a suggestion, Mayor, before we move on? I'd definitely like to finish up surface water with Richard Sawyer.
Right.
The next item was the salary plan. There's not a rush for that. It's there for your review. We can talk about that next week so that we could.
No, we can talk about it this week. But let's finish up with Mr. Sawyer.
Okay, great. Let's do it. Okay, surface water capital fund is what is up next for Richard. Oh, I have to share my
Presentation.
screen, don't I?
Yeah.
Of course I do.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Surface Water Capital Fund. So this fund accounts for all the expenditures for surface water capital improvement projects and surface water components of other capital improvements. The 21-22 proposed budget is about 3.9 million. It is funded primarily through the Surface Water Management Fund transfer from the Surface Water Management Fund. In this biennium, we are also we've obtained a Public Works Trust Fund loan for the 61st and 190th culvert that is currently under design that will be constructed in 2022. And then we also expect to receive approximately $200,000 through capital facilities charges, which are charges received from new development when they begin construction on new projects within the city. Next slide. So the projects being proposed for funding in 21-22 include the culvert I just mentioned, receiving the Public Works Trust Fund loan at 190th and 61st. The new fish passable culvert. The project is approximately 2.6 million, with 1.5 million being funded through that loan. We have each year usually various small works projects that come up, and these are projects that are typically a bit too large for our public works crew to do, so we typically contract these out, but they're usually smaller than a typical capital project, so they may range from $50,000 to $100,000 per project. We have SW31, which is a drainage improvement project that's been identified and on the books for a few years that we are now have funding to complete this biennium, as well as SW32, another drainage improvement stabilization project at 61st in the Arrowhead neighborhood. And then we have a new project being required as mitigation for the 68th Avenue project, Waters Walkway project. That was actually just identified and required within this last year. We need to replace 4 existing culverts on 202nd Street that have Blueberry Creek flowing through them with new fish passable culverts as mitigation for impacts that 68 has. And then, as John mentioned earlier, the Sammamish River Bridge replacement project will be getting about $1.2 million from the Surface Water Fund to help with that project. And that completes all the proposed capital surface water projects.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Marshall.
Yep, just to go into the substance of it just a little bit for Blueberry Creek or 61st for that matter, when the culverts are proposed to be improved, is there a study made of all the culverts on a stream? Like, for instance, we know we're replacing these further upstream, so we know the ones downstream are already good.
Yeah, that's a good question. And yes, we would generally like to look at culverts along the stream holistically and plan that out accordingly. However, in this case, these were specifically identified to us by the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Muckleshoot tribe as, we would like to see this happen here and as mitigation for what we see happening over here on 68. And so that was negotiated as part of that project.
Questions? Councilmember File.
So I hear somebody's vacuum in the background, and not worth knowing where that's coming from, but if we can quiet that down, that'd be great. When you're talking about fish safe, I'm assuming you're saying salmon safe, salmon passable culverts, and which is great. But I think we also have confusion within our community every time we put in a culvert and a disconnect that they are salmon safe, and that's why we're doing this. So I'm hoping this comes with communication and outreach.
Typically, any of our capital projects will have a community involvement and outreach component to them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? We need people, if you're not speaking, to mute your mics. All right. Joanne?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So that completes the, at least tonight's portion of the budget presentations. I have one more presentation to make, which I can do tonight, which is on the proposed 2021 salary plan, or we could defer it to next week and move into the financial sustainability plan. Your pleasure.
Let's go ahead with the salary and get it out of the way.
All right. Okay, so if I can get this to work correctly. So this year we embarked on a project to update the salary plan. Debbie Bent had the lead on this project and worked closely with myself and City Manager Rob Carlenzi, and we engaged Cabot Down Associates to perform a market review of comparable cities as we've done in prior years during the budget process. After that analysis and data was collected, the management team examined positions that were outside the market mean, and we considered making adjustments and prepared a 2021 proposed salary plan, which also includes a 1% increase in all ranges, which is in accordance with the CPIW Seattle June index, which we have historically used. So some of the changes that I'd like to mention include the new human resource manager position, which we discussed last week and in the budget and in the budget letter. It also included a change to the planner position, which was retitled based on the current planner's job description and the duties that are being performed. They were found to be comparable to what senior planners in our comp group perform, and also that the range that we had was comparable, so no adjustment to the range was recommended. It was just a title change. Surface water technicians were recommended to be retitled to environmental services technicians, in that that group is now the environmental services division or department. The payroll and accounting specialist position is recommended to be retitled to payroll and benefits coordinator with a 5.65% adjustment. And the permit and administrative assistant in development services was retitled to permit coordinator with a similar 5.65% adjustment. The management team felt that these two positions require substantial knowledge and skills and abilities, and therefore it was recommended to increase those salary ranges accordingly. Did I just lose my screen? Are you still seeing the proposed salary plan notes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good. And then the other permit and administrative specialists and the public works officer administrative specialists were retitled to administrative specialists rather than the long, more descriptive titles that they have had, with no change in their classification. And then the halftime recreation coordinator position title was changed to full-time recreation coordinator / administrative assistant to acknowledge the two functions that she would perform and support in two departments, both the city manager's department for recreation and the community development department for administrative assistance. So now I'm going to attempt to pull up my other screen. I'm kind of lost here. The salary plan is in your packet and also here, but I don't know if you are seeing it. I'll stop sharing that and start sharing the actual plan. How is that? Can you see the columns and the rows?
Very small, but yes.
Okay, so this, I hope you were able to see it in your packet more easily. I don't know how to, I guess I can increase it a bit. Anyway, this is the proposed salary plan. It shows you the adopted 2020 monthly pay ranges. Any positions where there is a proposed increase. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the communications specialist, because that position did fall lower than the market mean. So we are recommending that that be brought up to the market with a 5.67% increase to the range. And as I previously mentioned, the payroll and benefit coordinator and the permit coordinator, those ranges are recommended to be brought up 5.65%, resulting in the 2021 proposed monthly salary ranges in the final two columns. So with that, are there any questions, please?
Questions? Any questions? I'm not seeing any. Oh, yes, Deputy Mayor.
So I see that there's, yeah, the 1% adjusted pay ranges in 2021. Is that presuming that everybody gets, is that presuming a COLA, or is that just the ranges moving?
That is presuming a COLA on January 1 of 1%.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Gregory, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we had consultant come in with a spreadsheet that brought us current with all the cities and with that big salary analysis. Whatever happened to that spreadsheet program? Do we still use it or no?
We do not. That was about 8 years ago. And we used it at that time to refresh all of our salary ranges. We also undertook an effort to rewrite and update all of our job descriptions. And you're right, it was a huge effort. It was a very complicated spreadsheet and formula-driven analysis. So when we went out and wanted to go do another market survey, we picked a different consultant.
Okay.
So we now work with Cabot Down Associates.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Do you have anything else then for us?
I do not. So you'll see this again. It'll be brought forward with the final budget later in November, if there are no questions, comments, or adjustments in the meantime.
All right.
Okay, so thank you. That concludes tonight's budget presentations, and we'll meet again next Monday night.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is City Manager.
Yes, financial sustainability plan.
Indeed.
How you doing? Everybody doing okay? This is
Doing okay.
I've been waiting for tonight, at least me. I don't know about you. We sent out a press release about this last week, letting the public know that this was coming in front of you tonight, and you got a little bit of public comment about it earlier tonight. If I can, I'd like to share a screen.
Please.
Okay, this is another PowerPoint presentation, hopefully to help facilitate the conversation along. It's also uploaded to your packet. All right, do you see a slide presentation?
No, I see a black screen. Now I do.
Okay, do you see two slides or just one big one?
Two, one big and one small.
Oh, darn it. Okay. Because I don't want you to see the little one until I'm ready for you to see the little one.
Turn off notes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not PowerPoint stat. Oh, notes. Oh, wow. Okay, well, let's go with this. Do you still see it?
Yep.
Okay, we're just going to go with this. Okay, so let's first of all briefly remind everybody why we're here tonight. This city council actually has a history of adopting balanced budgets and maintaining healthy fund balances, or what we call reserves or savings account. We've been able to also have a AAA bond rating and audits with no findings, clean audits, things like that. So that's all well and good, but we have this pesky little thing called the financial forecast. And every year we update our financial forecast and go out about 6 years. And Joanne's been really great about that. She uses a special modeling software to help us do that. But as you all know, for many years, in fact, at least going back as far as I've been here, the financial forecast has always showed the lines crossing going out 2 or 3 years. Now, have they actually crossed? No. The reason they haven't crossed is because over the years, we've taken measures to keep them from crossing. We've reduced expenditures in certain areas. We've increased revenues. We've shifted costs to other funds. We've done all sorts of things to try to keep the lines from crossing. But quite frankly, we're running out of tools or ideas to keep those lines from crossing. And we could see this coming. And so we brought this to your attention, as you know. And here's an example of a financial forecast that we've been showing you over the years. This one we brought to you in 2019. And you can see the blue line is revenues, the red dotted line is expenditures. And you can see back in 2022, you could see that the expenditure, you could see back in this graph that we showed you back in 2019, that lines were going to cross and expenditures were going to exceed revenues in 2022. So what are the causes for this? Well, we have our status quo costs growing at 3 to 5% per year. And when I mean status quo, I mean just things like just maintaining what we got, right? The police contract, public works, staffing, all those things, they keep going at a 3.5% per year clip in increasing. And then we also have the property tax. That's the city's largest source of operating revenue. And there's a state imposed limit on property tax growth of 1% a year. Now, we also get additional money from new construction. We get an additional property tax from new construction, but that's pretty tiny compared to the overall property tax that we get. Other causes include unfunded mandates. Jennifer Gordon just talked to you about one tonight where the state said, hey, you don't get to charge residential neighborhoods for the street lighting bill anymore. You have to absorb it into your general fund. That's an example of an unfunded mandate. We also have declining or flat growth in other revenues like permitting fees and utility taxes. Here's a pretty graphic graph of utility taxes. You can see that the total amount of utility taxes we've been collecting over the years has been going down. And look at that. That was a little over. That was almost 1.5 million at one point. And so just in a few years, we've lost $500,000 a year in utility taxes, while our costs of doing business have been creeping up. So you saw all this, you knew all this, and you decided as a city council to set forth a plan or a path towards financial sustainability. And here's some actions you took in 2019. In January, the City Council established financial sustainability as one of its top 5 priorities for 2019 and 2020. Later that year in October, you approved a process for developing a 6-year financial sustainability plan. That same month, you also approved a consultant contract for independent review of our financial conditions and also to provide assistance with budget balancing strategies. And that firm is Management Partners with Steve Toller. And then November of 2019, you also adopted a charter for a financial sustainability plan task force. And so that January of 2020, just earlier this year, the 7-member task force was appointed. You also at the January retreat this year received an independent report from management partners confirming the projected structural deficit, and the task force held its first meeting. And our task force members were Mike Vanderline, Elizabeth Spring, Fernell Miller, Lynn Zwagstra, Anthony Tarnowski, Jeff Pooley. Other task force members that served earlier in the process were Darlene Ademba, David Lane, and Lou Novak. And look at that picture. Don't you miss those days when we could meet up close and personal like that in the same room? Wasn't too long ago. The work of the task force, in the charter, you task them with 3 main things. Number 1, to get acquainted with the city's finances and the way we operate, where the money comes from, how it's spent, that sort of thing. Also to advise and assist with the public engagement process. And then for them to actually roll up their sleeves and develop some strategies for a 6-year financial sustainability plan. So when they got started in January, this, you ready for this? This is one of the first things we showed them. Not a pretty picture. So this is what management partners came up with independently. This shows our general fund reserves and how they would be on the decline if we did not do anything. So they saw that, but they also saw some other pieces of data. I won't show you all the data that they went over, but here's an example that that management partners went over. Is management partners actually looked at revenue per capita, operating revenue per capita of comparison cities, and found that we actually, when it comes to our general fund, we actually collect a lot less revenues than the other cities we looked at. And that does adjust for taking out fire services. Another thing we talked about with this theoretical concept of price of government, where what you do is you take the total tax burden and divide it by income, and then that's a percentage. And so operationally speaking, this doesn't include capital and things like that, but operationally, you know, the blue line that you see is what we call price of government, or percent of what households pay towards city government. And this graph is a little blown up because, you know, you can see the scales start not at 0. So this is a little amplified than it really is. But you can see that over the years, at least since 2015, the price of government has been going down. So tax burden as a percent of income. And you can also see this gray line. This is just household income, and it's been creeping up in these last few years. Now, I don't have data on 2020 and what the pandemic has done. One thing I did, though, is let's say you imposed a new tax, a new revenue source that brought in $400,000. That $400,000 would bring price of government up to 1.33. So that just gives you a sense of what a tax increase would do on price of government. So, so the task force got all this information, and then at the same time we were doing public outreach and engagement. We were keeping the public updated in our mailed quarterly newsletters. We did a community survey back in December, and we showed it to you at the January retreat. We had public comment at every task force meeting. Of course, we also did the e-news and social media posts. We had a virtual public open house this last summer. And then we had the Balancing Act tool, that simulation tool that allows the public to participate. And we had hundreds of people in our community participate in that tool and got lots of great feedback, not in just what they selected, but also what the comments were. And we distilled all that information and compiled it and made it available for both the task force and for you. So let me talk a little bit about what Steve Toller and Management Partners did. Not only did they help us define the problem and independently verify what the problem was, but they also were hired to provide some strategies and give us some ideas on what we could do to have a balanced forecast. And so they looked at it on a continuum, starting it on the expenditure side of the continuum first. So looking at ways to control costs and shift costs, looking at service delivery changes. That might be saying, okay, if we're doing something in-house, could we contract that out to the private sector to make it less expensive, or vice versa? And then increases in revenues, and then full circle back to expenditures, service level reductions. We also provide an additional lens through which to look at this issue, and that was priority-based budgeting. So we spent quite a bit of time with the task force on priority-based budgeting, how it works, the scoring, the quartiles, and giving them that lens through which to look at the budget as well. So with that continuum, Management Partners had a methodology for considering strategies. They looked at difficulty of implementation, and then they also looked at the fiscal impact. And they gave things scores based on this matrix that you see. So Management Partners created a report that had a list of strategies and how they scored based on this methodology, and they presented that to the task force. One thing I just need to point out here is you may recall that the task force was going great. They were well on their way to getting towards some recommendations, and then the pandemic happened. I believe they had a meeting in April, I believe, and then we had to call it off for a while because the pandemic was consuming all of our lives. They took a hiatus for a while, and then they got back together in August to finish their work. And they had 3 meetings in August. And when they met to finally develop some recommendations, they actually created some guiding principles. And you can see these guiding principles here. Implement a balanced approach that recognizes and reflects changes in regs, recognizes that Kenmore has changed, and also recognizes community conditions, needs, and interests. And the second guiding principle, minimizing impacts on low-income residents. And then also funding services at the highest value to Kenmore residents and businesses. Shifting the burden of paying for service to those who use them, including non-residents, and making realistic levels of service, or maintaining realistic levels of service. So let's get into the task force's recommendations. They presented these to you on September 10th, and you all provided them with some feedback and direction. But just to review, they recommended on the expenditure side of the equation that we discontinue the school resource officer program, or at least our contribution to it, I should say. That we continue the expenditure reductions that were made in 2020, and that's about $650,000 per year. Add the HR, diversity, equity, inclusion and program into the budget. Increase mental health radar program by about the same amount that they are reducing school resource officer program. Increase pavement preservation funding to that recommended level that I've always been talking about. And then in 2024, see if we can have a less expensive way of providing jail services. On the revenue side of the equation, here's what the task force recommended. They recommended using banked capacity of property tax starting in 2022, but phasing it in over 3 years. Starting a cable TV utility tax of 6% halfway through 2022. Implementing a traffic photo enforcement program. both for safety, but also to help pay for traffic safety and pavement preservation, and a user fee study, an admissions tax of 5% on entertainment type venues in 2023, and then a utility tax on solid waste in 2024. So you all gave them feedback on these. The one we heard loudest and clearest from you is that you weren't too keen on a utility tax on solid waste. So my recommendation makes adjustments based on the feedback you all gave on September 10th. So here are my recommended strategies for a financial sustainability plan based on the feedback I heard from you. The expenditure strategies are pretty much all the same as the task force. The pavement preservation funding is slightly different, same year, but it starts about halfway through the year. But other than that, my recommendations are pretty identical to the task force recommendations. You can also see that my revenue strategies are similar, but not exactly identical. So you can see these first three are the same as the utility tax. Property tax banked capacity, I'm proposing to not do it at all in this current upcoming biennium, but started in 2023 and spread it out over 4 years instead of 3 years. And then I'm recommending a surface water utility tax starting in 2023, which is something that that I don't think the task force had a chance to consider. Hindsight, I wish we could have spent a little more time on that, because I think there's one reason in particular why it makes better sense, and I'll show a slide on that in just a second. And then admissions tax, I have it as well, but I think in a slightly different year. And then in 2027, and this is something that the task force did not discuss, but in 2027, I'm recommending a voter-approved transportation sales tax increase. And let me talk about a little bit why I'm recommending that. So this, even without this transportation sales tax increase, we are delivering to you what you asked us for, and that is a 6-year balanced forecast where you're not deficit spending out there in the outer years and through 2026. But what happens is that starting in 2027, you do start dipping into reserves again because costs continue to outpace revenues. And so what you can do at that point, looking to the year 2027, and again, that's pretty far out there, a lot can change, but based on what we know and what our forecast assumptions are, what you could do in 2026 is you could do one of 3 things in anticipation of what is forecast for 2027. You could, in 2026, you could further cut services and expenditures. You could councilmanically add new taxes for 2027, or you could go to the voters for a voter-approved tax. I'm recommending the third option in 2026 for 2027. And in particular, I'm recommending a voter-approved transportation sales tax increase. Why this particular one? Because this model assumes the loss of I-976 revenue, which is transportation related. And also the forecast shows that it's the transportation street fund that starts seeing the decline more rapidly. And so I think it makes sense to have a transportation related voter approved revenue source to consider in those out years. So surface water utility tax exemption, you can see that's one of the recommendations, and that's something that differs from the task force. One thing that the surface water utility tax has built into it is the ability for a full exemption. And I think that's the main reason why I'm recommending it to you tonight instead of a solid waste utility tax, for example, is that senior citizens and also disabled residents can, if they meet certain criteria, they can access a full utility tax exemption and therefore be exempt from the utility tax. And they would be exempt from the surface water fee itself and the tax. That's what I was trying to say. So you can see that what the requirements are, or the criteria for being eligible for that exemption. And it would be a full exemption. I'd like to compare, actually, before I compare, I'd like to touch on the expenditure reductions. So that is one of the recommendations that was both in the task force recommendations and in this final plan recommendation, and that is to continue the reductions in expenditures into 21 and beyond. And you can see down in the bottom right corner, you can see the total amount of those reductions. So at public comment, you've heard a couple of citizens say, hey, you should list the expenditure reductions. We want to see that list. This chart, this table is in the city manager's budget message in your budget. And it's also here on these slides, and it's also in the agenda bill for tonight's meeting. And so this table summarizes the reductions in expenditures that would continue on. Okay, now this table is what compares the task force recommendation to the final plan. This table might be a little bit hard to read on a slide deck like this, but it's also in your agenda bill. And you can see when it comes to expenditures, our strategies are pretty much identical, except for right here, just slightly different way of treating the pavement preservation funding. Just do it halfway through 2022, because we're going to need that much time to get a program like that implemented. Then comparing revenue strategies of the task force to the proposed final plan, you can see the differences here. Bank capacity, don't do it until 2023, phase it in over 4 years instead of 3 years. Do a cable TV utility tax in 2022. By the way, a cable TV utility tax in half a year would bring in about $180,000, $190,000. And so a full year would bring in about $380,000. And the impact to a typical, well, to someone who buys basic cable like myself, and what I did is I looked at my own cable bill, is it would have about a $3.30 a month impact on a cable TV bill where on basic cable. One other point I want to make on cable utility taxes, this does not tax the internet portion of the cable bill. It's just the TV video portion. So people, if they want to know what their cable TV utility tax would be or what they'd be paying per month, they'd have to take out the portion that is attributed to internet services. And sometimes those come bundled, and the cable TV company knows what portion is attributed to video. And if you dig deep in your bill like I did, you can see what that charge is. Then we have traffic photo enforcement, same as the task force. User fee study, same as task force. Admissions tax, I'm proposing that it just be delayed a little bit longer. And then I'm not proposing solid waste utility tax like the task force was recommending, but I am recommending a surface water utility tax, and for the main reason of being able to have that full exemption for low-income seniors and disabled. And then last but not least, the transportation sales tax that I talked about earlier. So this table compares the task force to the proposed plan. So if we implement the proposed final plan, are you ready for this? That's my attempt at a drum roll. This is what fund balances could look like based on our forecasts and assumptions. And Steve Toller of Management Partners produced this table for us. But this is the general fund. I'll show you the street fund in just a second. But this looks pretty good. This red line is the reserve goal. That's your 20% of operating expenditures reserve goal. So you can tell that we drop a little, but then we stay pretty steady through 2028. And again, this assumes that you do that transportation sales tax, and that the voters say yes to that in 2026, and then it would go into effect in 2027. But here's a little bit of bad news though. The reserves in the street fund would actually drop, and they would drop down to the target level. And the general fund would keep contributing to the street fund and would have to increase its contributions to the street fund in order to keep it level and keep it from dropping. This fund balance here is in the neighborhood of about $400,000. So that's the bad news. Good news is that it does stay at your target level. And then I'll show you the combined fund balances. So this is combined street and general fund reserves. So you can see the combined fund balance levels are here. And I have to mention here, this does not include strategic opportunities fund balance, nor does it include your strategic reserve fund balance. It's only street fund and general fund. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at what would happen if you did nothing, if you took no action, if you did not do that cable TV utility tax, you did not do the surface water utility tax, no photo enforcement. This is what would happen to your fund balances for the general fund. By the way, this does assume those cuts we made, the $600,000 in cuts this does have those still in there. So that would be kind of sad if we actually saw this happen, which is why we're all doing this tonight, why we went through this exercise over the past year. And this is combined general fund and street fund reserves. This is what would happen combined to the two funds. Why did I not show street fund? This model shows that we would keep street fund balance at the minimum 20% the whole time, which is why the general fund goes down so fast. But combined, the two combined would look like this. So by 2025, you'd be below your target level, and by 2027, you'd be in the red. And that's just your fund balance. This is a graph that summarizes the final proposed plan. This shows those fund balances, and these boxes down here show the different measures that we need to take and when. So far left talks about expenditures and reductions happening in 2020 and 2021. Cable TV tax and traffic photo enforcement going into effect in 2022. Surface water utility tax 23. Bank capacity phased in over 4 years, starting in 2023. Admissions tax in 24. And the transportation sales tax voter approved going into effect in 2027. So the last two slides are just special thanks. So before I go to that next slide, do you have any questions for me or any concerns or comments? And if you'd like, I could stop sharing, or if you want me to keep sharing, I can do that.
Deputy Mayor.
Rob, I want to thank you for all of this. This is the amount of work that's gone on. with this, both staff and the task force is phenomenal. And it's very thoughtful, and I appreciate all that. I just want to clarify one thing. So what we're passing today is a resolution that states our intentions, but we're not tying our hands in the future going forward. All these taxes are still going to have to be approved in future budgets or in future ordinances, and we will be discussing them, and there will be more public input as we go forward. We're not setting ourselves on a unchangeable track tonight. We're laying out what our vision is, but you know, the chances that we go through the next 6 years and don't change anything are probably fairly small at the end of the day. But this gives us a very thoughtful roadmap, and it gives us lines that don't cross for 6 years, which is something I've never seen in my time on council. It's a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to thank you and kind of clarify that we're not tonight, you know, passing an admissions tax in a couple of years tonight. You know, that we're doing these, that all this will be done later through ordinance.
I'm really glad you made that point, and I should have made that point. Yeah, the resolution is non-binding. You can, you don't have to follow it. I hope you follow it. But you're right. Any of the actual actions that it proposes will need to come back to you in future votes. Like the cable utility tax would actually have to be an ordinance that would be brought forward for you for your approval. Same with the surface water utility tax. So that's a really super important clarification. The other day I was talking to somebody in the finance department from City of Shoreline. They helped create their financial sustainability plan back in 2014. And they were just talking about how proud they were of that plan and how they've been following it. And it wasn't a plan that just got put on a shelf and started gathering dust. Shoreline looks to, refers to, and follows their plan, and they've pretty much been following it. In fact, back in 2014, they said in 2019, we should look at a B&O tax, and they passed a B&O tax. They followed the plan. Now, I'm not proposing a B&O tax, but, and that's not in this plan, but I'm just showing you an example of a city that adopted a financial sustainability plan and they've been following it. And you can follow it or not, and things, and Deputy Mayor, what you mentioned is right. Circumstances change. Our finances may actually start to look better than our forecast shows, and you may be able to actually delay or not do some of the things in the plan if things turn out better. On the opposite side of the coin, if things weren't as rosy as we thought, you may need to speed up some of those actions. So thank you for pointing that out.
Well, and one more thing too, I just wanted to kind of make it clearer for the public that part of the reason we're in this position is because the way the state has set up revenues for cities systemically means that our revenues don't quite meet our increasing costs. And that's something Rob talked about, but it's something that even if we do everything right over the next few years, there will be a time where we're facing the lines crossing again, because unless the state changes some things greatly, just because of the constraints that the state has put on cities for how we can run our business and how we can get revenues. And so this is not solve all of our problems going forward forever by any means either. The state, there's some things that we need to work on at the state level if we really want to get to a place where we're not playing this game every couple of years of trying to push the lines out.
Good point. Councilmember File.
Thank you. I noticed that the most recent budget analysis from the Association of Washington Cities shows budget projections of shared state budget revenue down on a wide variety of areas, real impactors for 2021. And so while I know that we're looking at transportation sales tax, I also know that they're working on a transportation revenue package. So amidst COVID and our recovery, there's so much that's up in the air. It's hard to really know even what's going to happen over the next year, let alone 2 years. And I think we're going to have to be nimble, so we don't negatively impact our own community.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can I go to the thank you slide?
Yes, please. And Nigel, you may have to take over. My screen's starting to act up again.
No problem.
Whoops. This task force that we worked with, they were such an amazing group of people. They worked so hard, and they asked such great questions and had great ideas. And if you didn't get a chance to see their last 2 meetings, I would highly encourage you see them, because they were so resourceful, and they put together their own sophisticated spreadsheets that helped facilitate the conversation. It just blew me away. And anyway, I can't say enough about this task force. It might be the best citizen committee I've ever worked with in my career. It was just so rewarding to work with them. Jim Reed, our facilitator, did an outstanding job the whole time. I can't say enough about Steve Toller with Management Partners. Steve's actually here with us tonight. He's just waiting in the wings in case you need him. But his analysis and his methodologies and the expertise and the research they did was so essential to help us have this conversation. And I'm so glad we hired them. And then, of course, Joanne Gregory. We definitely needed her every single step of the way. She's the one that provided the structure and all the data. And she helped a lot with the analysis and the discussions. And of course, if there was anybody that we couldn't have done it without, it would have been her. So thank you, Joanne, for helping us and keeping this process going. And then in the city manager's office, my coworkers just did a ton of work on the communications side. They developed this logo that you see. They did the press releases, all the social media posts, on and on, the website updates. So they did such a great job. And then Kenmore City staff, they all contributed and chipped in and gave ideas on how to balance the budget. And of course, you, the city council, giving us the vision and direction and the resources we needed to pull this off. And then last but not least, our engaged residents. The Balancing Act folks said that this was the most participation they had seen in any of their cities. And that includes cities like Denver and Tacoma. And so pretty amazing that we had such a great turnout by our residents. So anyway, that's all I have for you. Any other questions? Otherwise, I recommend that you consider the resolution.
I am not seeing any hands go up for questions. So the chair then would entertain a motion to pass ordinance number 20.
Resolution
20-357. I'm doing this with my screen flashing.
Yeah, I can read it for you. 20-357, establishing a financial sustainability plan, which is an exhibit to the resolution.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. This is where I'm going to need help. Any further questions?
I don't see any hands.
All right. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yeah, given the uncertainty of everything, I just can't do it. No.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Due to where we are at fiscally as a community in Kenmore recovering from the COVID crisis together, I have reservations. And I apologize to my fellow council members, but I have to vote no.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yes.
The vote is 5 yes, 2 no.
All
Motion.
right. Next item on the agenda is city manager report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to turn the time over to Brian Hampson to give an update on our meeting today with Cadman.
Hey, thanks, Rob. And good evening. Really good, productive meeting you guys had here. It's fun watching it. Speaking of productive meetings, because of your direction to us to go talk to Cadman about whether or not they would allow us to test on their site, we set up a meeting, and today we had that meeting with Cadman. The short, quick answer to that question is yes, provided that the test is based on Puget Sound Clean Air Agency standards. And there's a lot more details that would come of that. But we had a really good conversation with them. And so I thought I'd share that other information with you as well. One thing we heard, so this is really the first meeting that we've had with this company. This company bought the business from Cimex back in 2017. And one thing that we heard from Cadman at this meeting was that they're committed to acting in an environmentally and social responsible manner. And so that was refreshing to hear, because I feel like we might be able to get a little bit more commitment from them and working together, which they said they're totally willing to work together on all levels. And that, includes coming to a council meeting and explaining to you everything that they're committed to do and how their facility works, and also meeting with the public. And we have some public members who are interested in meeting with them, and they were willing to sit down and meet with them at the right time. So that was good to hear. We found out something else today that was pretty interesting and helpful. Is that they've actually, because they heard of this information, they hired a independent consultant to conduct a test on the emissions that are coming out of the plant right now. And so they have received that report back from the independent consultant, and they are willing to share that with the city. They're just reading through it right now. It's pretty long, and so they're gonna share that with the city. And once they do that, of course, it becomes a public record. And with the results from the test that they did, we are on our side are going to hire our own team, a environmental engineer and a special counsel to help us navigate through this situation, including the test that they provided. And so what we kind of planned, the plan leaving this meeting was the first thing that we do was, of course, come to you and give you an update on what happened. In the meantime, we could start to schedule a future date that they can come back and talk to the council members. And then they're actually going to turn over the report to us, and we'll have our special engineer take a look at it. And then based on the report, we can go forward on testing and what is decided, based on the expert's opinion on what should or shouldn't be tested. If there's something in there that's missing, or there's something else that's we're not comfortable with or not satisfied with, we can have those discussions. And they're totally open to conducting further tests in the future, like I said, provided that they meet the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency's standards for testing of that nature.
Brian, I actually thought I heard something different. So in the meeting, I said very clearly, our main mission in this meeting is to ask you if the city can do testing on your site. Can we do testing on your site? And their answer was, we want to take a look at the independent test we just had done and that followed Puget Sound Clean Air Agency standards. We want you to review that, and we want your consultant to review that. And you may determine from those results that you have the information you need. So we're not committing to allow you to do testing on our site until we've all looked at this report that this test report that we just had done. So I didn't hear them say, yes, you can test. I heard them say, why don't we take a look at this report first and then decide whether we'll let you on our site and test.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to explain what I was trying to explain. You know, take a look at the report first, and if we determine in the end that we're not satisfied with what was tested or what they did do, then they would be open to allow us to test based on Puget Sound Clean Air Agency's standards for testing. So that was interesting and a little bit positive. The other side of this is the notice of violation. So they're working with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency on resolving the NOV, the notice of violation. And what that really means is their construction permit, their notice of construction permit would have to be reissued. But we heard today that they are going to resubmit for their notice of construction permit in the next couple of weeks. And their resubmittal is going to include standards and testings that could be required if it was a modern, what they called modern facility. And so that was positive. So they're not, to my opinion, they're not going to fight back with Puget Sound Clean Air Agency about this, and they're going to go forward with agreeing to bring the plant into modern testing.
And that's huge. So they're saying that if they follow this notice of construction permit, that they actually do see a future where they will be following emissions standards and testing. But they did have a caveat to that. They said as long as it's within Puget Sound Clean Air Agency's authority and rules, and as long as it's similar to what standards other asphalt plants in the area are held to. They're not going to agree to be held to a higher standard than other asphalt plants. So that was their caveat on that, on standards and testing, but they do see a future where they'll be doing standards and testing on emissions.
I see some hands.
Deputy, and I can't see them.
Deputy Mayor has a question.
Well, okay, so if they, I don't know exactly what, I don't know all the details around this permit you're talking about, but if they violated the city code, if they didn't put in for a permit when they needed to, and especially if they did all of that after we implemented the business license for heavy industry, what's to stop us from just yanking their operating license to their license to operate in the city? I mean, if they ducked the rules and they broke the rules, what's to stop us from taking away their license and taking away their ability to operate?
So there's a couple of different things here. One is we do have a regulatory business license, and any violation of that regulatory business license, we of course can revoke the business license itself. Now that doesn't have as much teeth as what the permit that was required from Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, which is the notice of construction. The notice of construction is basically just a permit that allows them to operate. So they, in my opinion, have more authority on shutting down this facility than the city would. I think it would be a little bit more of a struggle for us to basically say, hey, we're going to revoke your business license, and therefore you can't operate in the city anymore.
I would also say that they're still going through due process on that violation. So that still has to play out before we could bring down a hammer like that.
I'm still not able to see anybody.
All right. Councilmember Karina File has a question.
Thank you. quite frankly, the Department of Ecology does have purview in this area. So I think it's lovely that the agency, the company, wants to be proactive and that they've done some testing and they want to share that testing. Having testing available. Thank you, Mayor Baker. Having testing available that's apart from their own is rather a standard of practice ethically in ensuring the data is true and real, applied to different circumstances, if not even a third test. That's just part of good scientific approaches. But, you know, the OSHA-WISHA also has oversight, and this is a plant that had upgrades done stealthily under the radar, and they are operating without a permit. They are operating without a permit. And I think it's just D&D that they want to exercise, let's upgrade, but we're not going to improve any better than any other plant. The fact is they've upgraded now, they've been upgrading, and that changes the status of grandfather clauses or where you then restart at. They have to start at that higher standard. And that's the reality of our state and the governance provided by our state. So I do not want to offer a all-limb branch on a lesser improvement if they've already been not so great actors. And I appreciate that they're attempting to try, and I appreciate that they will be willing to upgrade, but they're going to have to upgrade to the best of standards concurrent with our state requirements for upgrading a factory and come to code. And if that's different than some other factories, well, that's on them. They knew what they were doing, and I have no free pass on that. And that's a BS caveat. I'm just going to put it like that. But we do have some options. I had a wonderful good discussion with the AWC today and the city on tap, and hearing some different perspectives across our state. It's very interesting that Marysville had some similar issues with the plant and were very effective with their approach. And so I think we need to look towards what happened there. There are some very clear, excellent examples of how they had to deal with that problem within Snohomish County, and very practical for us. And of course, we want to be good partners with our businesses, but that also means businesses get to be good partners with our community, our citizens, and our city.
Councilmember Curtis.
I'd say I'm encouraged by this first meeting. It could have gone a very different direction. It could have just been a no way, Jose. We're not going to test anything. We're not going to cooperate. We're not going to do anything for you. So I'm encouraged, and you know, it's the start of a process. And I think having the legal and the specialty consultation, we'll be coming in with a full set of information and resources instead of just guessing what we might be able to do or might not be able to do.
I have a follow-up question. I just heard one of you say that they are operating without a permit. Brian, is that?
So that's what they're doing right now. The notice of violation that's issued from Puget Sound Clean Air Agency was that they were operating outside the guidance of their current old notice of construction permit. And so that's what they're kind of going back and forth with, and if they needed to get a new notice of construction permit. And that's what we heard today was they were going to resubmit for their permit, the new permit, in the next couple of weeks. And the new permit is going to have some stuff in it that would be required for other plants in this area or modern plants in this area. So they haven't been decided that they don't have a permit right now. That's what their notice of violation is, to figure out, who's correct. Cadman is looking at it more as if some of the stuff that they replaced was more maintenance, and Puget Sound Clean Air Agency was saying not to them. Those would trigger a new permit. And so they still have the underlying permit that they're supposedly working under.
So I think it's premature to say that they're operating without a permit. The allegation is they're operating outside their permit, but that hasn't gone through full due process yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you for the correction then. I appreciate that. But I do hope that we are going to be working with the Department of Ecology, because they do have some purview here. And it would be doing due course diligence, of course.
Yeah, but we'll be working with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency on this one. Councilmember O'Kane.
Yeah, Councilmember.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hampson, for your detailed report out, and Mr. Carlinzi, City Manager, for your clarification on Cadman's description of their openness to testing. I have a couple of comments. I think they're most related to City of Kenmore and engagement from our community. I'm certainly thankful to hear that Cadman has taken on the expense to initiate some testing, and I'm hopeful that the testing will come back with results that meet the needs of our community. I do have a concern about when the business tests itself, they have knowledge of what they are doing and when they are doing it. So I think it's very important for the City of Kenmore to compare testing timing to reports of toxic fumes. I can say that last Friday, I drove by the plant. I was on 181st, and I could smell the fumes. I was stunned at how strong the smell was. It smelled like a diesel truck was right there, and it was almost exactly as if what David Morton had described was happening at the plant. So I just want to call attention to that. When we receive the test, our review needs to be thorough and looking to timing of testing. I also think it's incredibly important that we open to public comment. I recognize that Puget Sound Clean Air Agency standards should meet the expectations and needs of our community, but we also do have scientists and community members who have entrenched themselves in the study of these fumes and may have some concerns that go beyond what is tested. So I think their voices and input are incredibly important, and we should make sure that we, as we go forward with the testing, are able to test for our community. I am also thankful to hear that although we may not use it as we're going through due process, we actually have a hammer in our back pocket, which is related to the business license through the City of Kenmore. We may not use it, but it exists. And it's important for us to acknowledge that that's something that is a possibility. I genuinely want to thank our community for coming forward and being so vocal and moving us to the point that we are today. I also thank you, Mr. Carlinzi and Mr. Hampson, for taking the time to initiate this meeting with Cadman. It's incredibly important, and your transparency about what took place in the meeting that our community is able to hear tonight is so important. That it takes our community to come forward. We have needs that need to be met related to the fumes at that plant, and I think we need to be stringent in our expectations of testing. So thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, there's a couple.
I'm only seeing 3 at a time.
Councilmember
Yeah, Councilmember Marshall.
And Rob Carlinzi had something.
Yeah, thanks very much to City Manager and Brian Hampson. Probably I can speak for the 3 of us on the council who grew up in this town. I don't remember any time ever that the cement or the asphalt plant offered to give the result of its test or to test its facilities. So it's a watershed moment. This is amazing. And then the question is, you guys did say that they were willing to meet with the community.
Yes. They wanted to make sure the timing was right. We figured that probably would be better if they come and talk to you, council, first, and then we could set something up with the community.
All right, city manager.
Go ahead and let Council Member Srebnick go.
Councilmember Srebnick.
Yeah, just I want to echo what Councilmember Marshall said. I mean, this is truly a turning point. I mean, it sounds like, you know, Cadman is a much better potential partner than CMEX ever was or their predecessors. So I just want to commend staff for seeing that opportunity, pursuing that opportunity, being transparent, and this is a really good first step. I'm excited, potentially.
Yeah, I had three main takeaways from it. Number one, they want to engage the community, including meeting with the residents and meeting with you. So that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is they've done testing, and it's supposed to have been done by an independent consultant who followed Puget Sound Clean Air Agency standards of testing. So they've done testing and they're willing to show us the results, and we get to comb through those results. We get to hire our own consultant to question them and review them. And then the third takeaway is that they're going to be moving towards emission standards and testing as part of that construction permit. Those three takeaways were what I came out of the meeting with. Brian, anything else?
No, I just think that, like Councilmember Srebnick said, we haven't had this kind of dialogue and commitment from any previous companies. So this was, in my opinion, a really good first introductory meeting and a good start. They said something else that I like to hear is when we get a complaint, you know, they want to be notified too, because they're going to send somebody out to the site or possibly even out to the location to try to figure out what's wrong. So that was good. Of course, CMEX wouldn't have that kind of involvement with us before. So yeah, good meeting.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Mr. City Manager, anything else?
You have an executive session tomorrow night.
Yes, we do.
That's it.
All right. Comments and council member reports. Councilmember O'Kane.
Just a big thank you to staff for the incredible budget presentation and to the Financial Sustainability Committee for their great work on behalf of our community. What you have done is made sure that we heard what is meaningful and important to the community so that we can have a plan to move forward to. So I really appreciate it. I also again thank staff for meeting with Cadman. I am actually thrilled with the outcome of the meeting so far and looking forward to where this goes. And I want to give an even bigger thank you to our community for driving us to this place, because your voices matter, and this is how we make a difference in our world today. So thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, thanks to City Manager and Mr. Development Services Director Brian Hampson for that meeting today. And yes, most especially to the people for an environmentally responsible Kenmore and all the community members who've been coming out meeting after meeting, night after night to focus on the importance of this issue. It hasn't happened since I've grown up here again, and I think that's pretty amazing. Yes, we have a long road to go, and we're nowhere near the end of it. But at least let's take this just for this brief moment and say, wow, what a great testament to community activism. And then also I think there may have been a brief apology. I think it was Councilmember File from the vote as to the budget and all that. And I got to say that, every single vote from the council members here, I know is considered, is sincere, is honest. I may disagree with it, hopefully not at times too vociferously, but wow, no need for any sort of apologies. I respect and honor your vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add?
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Pretty much ditto. Thank you to the community for keeping the pressure on. And thank you for, I completely concur with Councilmember Marshall. No one should feel like they need to apologize for their votes. I mean, we all, respect. I certainly respect everybody's opinion in this room. And, we might differ, and that's okay. That's okay.
Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I'm so used to going last. This is unusual. I want to echo what my fellow colleagues have already said. I don't want to repeat because they've said it so beautifully. But it is a new day, and we have a lot to be grateful for with the excellent negotiations that have occurred between the Cadman Company, our city, and the beautiful work of our community. I wanted to give a little update of, I've been attending a number of meetings, the AWC conference, the AWC Member Expo, and the Sound Cities Association Partners Forum on Building Equitable Economy and Recovery. And recently attended a interview on KOPN radio out in the Midwest, comparing Midwest, Eastern Coast COVID reality versus West Coast and what we're doing in Washington State. And that was really interesting. And a community member had asked again about the Veterans Day recognition and proclamation. We actually have moved on a little bit with that. We worked with one that's been adapted beautifully and considered, and I believe that Stacy and some of our local veterans proposed a really lovely one, also with the help of Councilmember Deborah Shrednick. Thank you. And I think what we really need is an update of what's coming next and when would they expect to see a draft in a packet on agenda. Maybe our city manager can give us a little update on that. But that's about it.
Yeah, I think we're going to have it on the 9th.
Ooh, the 9th, very exciting. Very good.
And then we'll have a flag raising ceremony on the 11th at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Lovely, that's great. Thank you. And
Deputy Mayor, oh, sorry.
And I believe that the focus, the National Veterans Association and the Veterans Association of Washington State recognize this year as Veterans in Focus. So that's who we are celebrating. And I believe the interest of the group is to highlight veterans throughout the week and share on social media. And I think that's a beautiful idea. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, everybody has already said everything I was going to say. So I do want to give a quick shout out to Councilmember O'Kane and thank her for making the motion a couple weeks ago to ask staff to reach out to Cadman. I appreciate that. I appreciate the movement that's happened because of that. So I just wanted to thank her. And yeah, other than that, it's exciting to see them actually come to the table, and I am excited to see what comes from all of this.
So I'm in agreement. Since I've been on the council, I've never had the type of openness with the cement plant as we have now. I'm very encouraged to see this happening. And as a veteran, I'm looking forward to the proclamation and also the flag raising. Anyway, if there's no further business to come in front of us, we are.
Night, everyone.
Night.